Great Tribal Chief. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 576, Deputy Commander-in-Chief. The seat of the Royal Court of the Iroquois League is on the southern shore of Lake Ontario, near Rochester in later generations. But now Rochester is just a small military fortress built by the French, but now it has been taken over by the British. The scale of Rochester in later generations is not that big, but there are two famous existences in this city. One is the Rochester Institute of Technology, the second oldest private polytechnic university in the United States, and the other is the famous Erie Canal. Rochester Institute of Technology will not say much. Shi Xiong is not familiar with that university, but the later Erie Canal was a canal that Shi Xiong cared very much about. Although the Erie Canal dug by later Americans was from Buffalo to Albany, Rochester is the most important junction on this canal. Because although the Erie Canal connects the Hudson River with the Great Lakes, Rochester is connected to the Erie Canal through the Genesee River that runs through its urban area. Eventually, ships can pass directly from Lake Ontario to Rochester, Genesee, and the Erie Canal leads directly to Buffalo and thus into Lake Erie. Shi Xiong had planned to also dig a canal similar to the Erie Canal, but he did not intend to dig that long. If you really dig a canal along the route of the later Erie Canal, with the current Cherokee technology, it is still somewhat reluctant. But this section of the canal from Rochester to Buffalo is not only short in distance, but also much less difficult to excavate, so Stone Bear's plan is to first dig the canal from Rochester to Buffalo. In the future, if necessary, another section of the canal from Rochester to Albany via Syracuse will be dug. This is an important plan for Shi Xiong's future development, but he does not have the energy to focus on this now. He is now in the seat of the former Iroquois Alliance's royal tent, where Wahak, the chief of the Mohawk tribe, is sitting, meeting the visiting British envoys. The identity of this British envoy is unusual. He is Sir Henry Clinton, the current Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in the United States. This middle-aged Englishman, now 46 years old, participated in the 7 Years' War 20 years ago, and returned to England after the victory of the 7 Years' War. Now that the War of Independence broke out, he was sent to the North American New World last year to serve as the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the British Army. And Shi Xiong also knew that in the next year, this guy would become the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, and even the most important governor of Gibraltar in 1794. Henry Clinton's family is extraordinary. His uncle is the 7th Earl of Lincoln, and his family is also related to the Duke of Newcastle. Yes, the Duke of Newcastle is the Duke of Newcastle from the Cavendish family. This kind of family is not even better than that of Colonel Alvin Alston that Stone Bear has seen before. Although the two houses are both earls, the earls and earls are not the same. In any case, the middle-aged handsome pot who looks pretty handsome in front of him can personally lobby the Stone Bear, which is enough to show that the British attach great importance to the Cherokee tribe. Although Henry Clinton was not a later British general and governor of Gibraltar at this time, he had already been promoted from a brigadier general to a full-fledged British Army 4 years ago, in 1772, Major General. In contrast, although Colonel Alvin Alston is more than 10 years younger than Henry Clinton, there is still a brigadier general who is extremely difficult to cross between them. In any case, although Henry Clinton has not succeeded Major General William Howe as the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in the United States, his position as Deputy Commander-in-Chief is still very good. Although Shi Xiong knew about this guy's information in his previous life, after the two met, they exchanged very polite greetings for a while. After introducing each other, Henry Clinton said his intentions directly. "Honorable Chieftain, Son of God, first of all, I would like to congratulate you and your army for taking back the ancestral land of the nobility. This is a very worthy celebration," Shi Xiong proudly said. "We have waited for this day for more than 300 years, and now we have realized our wish for more than 300 years. This is naturally something to be celebrated. Henry Clinton said. However, the nobles defeated our allies the Iroquois, which had a great influence on our military plan, so I would like to ask the chief, you and your violent bear, do you have any plans for the army in the future? Well, I mean, can you continue to cooperate closely with our British Empire, just like you did with Colonel Jones in Jamestown? Shi Xiong looked at this somewhat serious Major General Collington playfully, and then said with a smile, General Collington, I think at this sensitive moment, our Cherokee should abide by a neutral attitude. Okay, after all, the war between you and the Americans is an internal matter between you. As the natives of this continent, if we rashly join your family affairs, it doesn't seem very good, right? No, Honorable Chief, although the war between us and the Americans is a civil war, as the overlord, we sincerely invite you and your army to join us. I hope we can work closely together again, defeat those insurgents. In this way, we can continue to trade and cooperate more closely. You and your people can also gain the most sincere friendship of our British Empire. www.wuxiaspa.com. Could it be us? Is there no sincere friendship now? Shi Xiong made a joke. Oh, Major General Collington also smiled awkwardly. Of course, we also have incomparably sincere friendship now. At this time, Stone Bear would naturally not promise anything to the Major General Collington, so after a lot of laughter, Stone Bear still said seriously, General Collington, I think our tribe will it's better to remain neutral. After all, not only have our trade with your country been maintained very well over the years, but also our trade with those Americans has also been maintained very well. You let me make a choice at this time. It makes me very embarrassed. And as you know, we have just conquered several tribes in the Great Lakes region. At this time, the tribes need stability the most. Even if I want to intervene in this war between you and the Americans, I'm afraid my people will not agree. Stone Bear's words gave Major General Henry Clinton a look of disappointment on his face. Shi Xiong's next words made his face turn cloudy. However, my dear General, although our tribe will not stand on your side, I will assure you that we will never stand on the American side, and in the next 10 years, our tribe will only develop ourselves with peace of mind. We will never take action against your country or the Americans. Well, there is one more point I hope you can consider, that is, you have probably heard of us, Grumpy Sergeant. The weapons we use should be very good, so if your country needs some weapons and ammunition supplies, I think we can provide you with. Chapter 577, Mr. Chubby. Henry Clinton was smiling when he left. Although they did not succeed in persuading the chief of this powerful tribe to let this powerful tribe stand on their side, after all, the Cherokee tribe promised not to stand on the American side. This is actually the same as being neutral in the Iroquois. Major General Henry Clinton never thought that the mighty British Empire would not be able to defeat the militia formed by a group of buns. Those rebels were able to stalemate with the British Empire's army to the present level. A big factor is because they got the help of the local indigenous people and rely on guerrilla warfare to resist the powerful British army. And now, all the native tribes near the East Coast have been conquered by the Cherokee tribe. As long as the Cherokee tribe has made a clear commitment to remain neutral, then those natives will not help the Americans, and the Americans have lost the foundation of guerrilla warfare. Rebels who cannot fight guerrilla warfare cannot be compared with the regular army of the British Empire in any case. Major General Henry Clinton thought so. The most important thing is that the amazing chief is willing to sell weapons, which is undoubtedly a very good thing for the British Empire. Now the entire 13 colonies of North America are in rebellion, and even the military factories that originally produced weapons are now unable to produce weapons and ammunition normally. Therefore, the weapons used by the soldiers of the British Empire must be transported from the British mainland by ships. This undoubtedly increases a lot of costs, but also has a lot of risks. After all, the Atlantic Ocean is not a joke. Every year ships sink in the stormy waves of the Atlantic Ocean. And if a stable supplier of weapons and ammunition can be found on the New World side, It will undoubtedly ease the pressure on local arms manufacturing and transportation. Especially the weapons used by the Grim Bear Army are said to be quite powerful. Take the Ferguson rifle equipped by the soldiers on the New World side. It has an effective range of 200 yards. This is not comparable to the old Brown Beth rifle, but Patrick Ferguson, who invented the Ferguson rifle, Major General Clinton, has also seen it. The Major Ferguson made it very clear that this Ferguson rifle was actually developed under the guidance of the magical Chief Cherokee. And in addition to the Ferguson rifle, they also developed an effective range and reloading rifle, a faster rifle, Burst Bear rifle. Even Major Ferguson said that the Ferguson rifle equipped by the British Army is far from being compared with the Burst Bear rifle. It's just that the Bear rifle has never been out. I have only heard of this famous rifle outside, but no one has ever got it. If the chief can provide some blasting Bear rifles, then this war will be much easier. This is also the idea of Major General Collington. Well, if the chief can provide more ammunition for the tossing barrel, it would be even better. Major General Collington thought a little greedy. Now that the manufacturing technology of the grenadier has spread among the European powers, although the production method of this small, lightweight but powerful weapon was passed down from the Kingdom of Spain, the ammunition cannot be imitated by the European powers. The ammunition for the grenadier needs to be purchased from the Fernando family in the Kingdom of Spain or the textile tycoon in the United Kingdom, and their grenadier ammunition is also obtained from the Cherokee tribe in the New World. The power of the bullet-throwing barrel is indeed huge, but the ammunition restricts the large-scale application of this weapon. Many domestic alchemists, including those scientists from the Royal Academy of Sciences, are working hard to crack the formula of the magical propellant and the powerful drug, but this kind of thing is difficult to complete in a short time. It seems that in this war, I can only hope that the chief will supply more ammunition for the grenades. Major General Collington was helpless, and this feeling of being restrained was very uncomfortable. As for the new type of artillery with greater power and longer range that Major Ferguson said, Major General Collington on horseback shook his head, still consciously throwing out this unrealistic idea, out of mind. Stone Bear is naturally unaware of the various thoughts that came out of Major General Henry Clinton, who left in the morning. He is preparing to receive an American messenger in the afternoon. And for the messenger who is about to meet, Shi Xiong is also full of expectations. If the Major General Henry Clinton I saw in the morning is barely a figure in British history, then the representative of the American who I will see this afternoon is definitely one of the greatest figures in American history. Because the person Shi Xiong is about to meet is John Adams. Yes, this John Adams is the first Vice President of the United States in the original historical time and space, and the John Adams who later became the second President of the United States, and also the John Adams in the 5-member committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence. Well, it's worth mentioning that www.wuxiaspa.com stood by the British in the famous Boston Massacre in 1770 and defended the innocence of the British soldiers and officers who shot and killed people. That lawyer, the same Mr. John Adams. Seeing this guy who is less than 1.7 meters tall and has a waist circumference of about 1.2 meters, Shi Xiong can't help but smile. No wonder the founding father of the United States has the nickname Mr. Chubby, just his size, properly round and fat. You must know that the current Mr. Adams is only 40 years old, but his size, Shi Xiong, can only mean TSK. It's an honor to see you, the great chieftain, the great son of God. You lead your Blizzard army in the war to conquer other tribes and show you the bravery and fearlessness. It really makes people feel extremely admired. Once the greetings were over, the round and fat Mr. Adams started his eloquence. He was a brilliant compliment to the Stone Bear. The Stone Bear was a bit embarrassed. This guy really deserves to be a lawyer, just like this. In the 21st century, there is still a great chance that he will be able to run for the President of the United States, Shi Xiong thought to himself. Obviously, Mr. Washington, now the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental U.S. Army, understands the abilities of his important assistant, so he sent him as a messenger, trying to use Mr. Adams' eloquence to impress the chief of the powerful tribe. It's a pity that, again, Shi Xiong is an out-and-out traverser. He knows the details of the chubby gentleman in front of him, and he also understands what he wants to do, so it is naturally impossible for Shi Xiong to be affected by him. The clever tongue is like a spring. Chapter 578, Politician. John Adams was also very depressed. He was very good at talking with this amazingly sized chief, but why his saliva is almost dry. This guy doesn't say a good thing. Of course he didn't know that the big chief in front of him would not be moved by his bright tongue. In fact, the reason why Shi Xiong was willing to meet this John Adams was more out of curiosity about historical celebrities. This is the first vice president and second president of the United States in the original historical time and space, alive, and his eldest son will also become the sixth president of the United States. It's just that now his eldest son is only 9 years old. If you don't see this kind of character with your own eyes, you really feel ashamed of your identity as a traveler. As for agreeing to John Adams' request, it is simply impossible. After all, even if you don't stand in the team, if the situation continues to develop, the American Continental Army has a great possibility of eventually defeating the British. After all, behind the Continental Army there are still eager French, Spanish and Dutch people. The Continental Army may not be doing well now, but 2 years later, after the French, Spanish, and Dutch joined the war and stood on the Continental Army's side, coupled with the British soldiers' discomfort and Ed's attacks, the war the direction of will soon lean towards the Americans. It's just that Shi Xiong knows these things, but the chubby gentleman in front of him doesn't know him. He only knows that the Continental Army is not dominant now. On the contrary, it is still at a disadvantage in the northern battlefield. In particular, the two tribes of the Iroquois alliance, which had been struggling to move, were suddenly destroyed by the powerful big chief in front of them. This is undoubtedly a bad thing for the Continental Army. Mr. Chubby is naturally not as confident as Major General Henry Clinton, so he thinks it is very, very important to convince the chieftain in front of him. So, even if he is already dry, he still insists on lobbying. Shi Xiong also had to admire the toughness of this guy. In fact, to be honest, Shi Xiong doesn't really appreciate Mr. Yuan Chuan. Perhaps because of his character, the stone bear, who has always adhered to principles in his past and present life, doesn't like Mr. Yuan Chuan's character like a wall and grass. This is not Shi Xiong's nonsense. He is really familiar with this chubby gentleman, and he is really a bit disgusted with what this lawyer-born guy did before. In fact, in the past 10 years or so, this chubby gentleman can be said to be an out-and-out pro-British faction. He has always been on the side of the British when he was a lawyer. Don't forget, 6 years ago, he was a member of the House of Commons in Massachusetts. He also defended the innocence of the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre and successfully acquitted the British soldiers who shot the Boston workers. It was only when he was recommended to serve in the upper house of the state 3 years ago that he was vetoed by the royal governor. It is estimated that this incident made Mr. Yuan Pang aware of certain things, so he did not hesitate to turn around and join the Continental Congress, which was dominated by Americans, and became the conference representative of Massachusetts with his support for the Boston Tea event. This gorgeous turn or show operation is really impossible for ordinary people to do, but this chubby gentleman did it naturally. It shows that his face is thick and his utilitarianism is strong. From now on, this chubby gentleman's various sorrow operations became even more powerful. He even became one of the 5-member committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence, thanks to his support, to Mr. Washington, step by step to the peak of power. In fact, Mr. Yuan Fat's approach directly reflects the shamelessness of these Western politicians. Not only Mr. Chuan, but even Mr. Washington is actually this kind of person. Now, this guy who has shown incisively and vividly in thick black studies summarized by the ancestors of China, is performing hard in front of Shi Xiong. It's a pity that the benefits that Mr. Yuan Chuan can promise Shi Xiong now are too few. After all, even he has no bottom in his heart. Not to mention that Shi Xiong did not intend to help the Americans or the British. After all, we also came from China, and we follow the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. Now that your own family is fighting against your own family, that is your own internal affairs, and Lao Tzu will not interfere in your internal affairs. So, you guys should continue to fight. It's better to kill yourself all. That's how I can deal with the winner. Of course, although Shi Xiong has decided to remain neutral, the sale of arms and other materials to the Continental Army will never be let go. After all, we have to remain neutral, so a bowl of water must be leveled, otherwise, I will sell arms and supplies to the British, so how can you play with the Continental Army? In the original historical time and space, your descendants made a fortune in the name of neutrality in World War I and World War II. Why don't we use this trick to deal with you at this time? Therefore, Shi Xiong, under the principle of neutrality, made the same promise as Major General Collington to Mr. Yuan. It is absolutely impossible for Lao Tzu to fight for you, but as long as you contribute money and talents, Lao Tzu doesn't mind selling some of the arms or supplies you urgently need. Although he could not persuade the big chief to stand in line, Mr. Yuan Chuan got the promise to buy supplies and arms, which also made him more or less stable. This powerful Indian tribe really can't afford it, since they don't stand in line to remain neutral. www.wuxiaspot.com. Things are undoubtedly stronger than they stand on the side of the British. The most important thing is that everyone knows how awesome the weapons used by this powerful tribe are, and it is undoubtedly a great thing to be able to get their weapons. Dismissed the fooled Mr. Chubby, the stone bear immediately summoned Kara Klilu, Bighorn Sheep, Fast Horse, Bone Spear and others, and began to discuss the arms and supplies to be sold to the British and the Continental Army. It's easy to talk about everything, no doubt cigarettes, salt, alcohol and food. Compared with food, the British need cigarettes, salt, and alcohol as luxuries. Therefore, these materials will severely scrape a layer of grease from the two warring parties. As for the highlight, arms are undoubtedly. In order to prevent the leakage of their own munitions technology or being copied by the British and Americans, the munitions sold to them must be castrated. It is absolutely impossible to sell a full version of a weapon like the burst bear rifle to both sides in the war, and the design concept of the rear-pull rotary gun cannot be spread. Therefore, a rifle that slightly increases the effective range of the rifle based on the Ferguson rifle is necessary to appear on the battlefield of independent warfare. In fact, as early as a few years ago, Shi Xiong had ordered several of the 18 Arhats to start developing this rifle. Many such castrated rifles have been produced in the military factory in Shangjing now. Chapter 579. The Need for Change. Even if there are already many scientists in Beijing now searched from Europe, as well as the biggest Goldfinger, the stone bear, but with the current technology, I want to develop a new style that surpasses the blasting bear rifle. That is a difficult thing. However, if you want to castrate the burst bear rifle, it's much simpler. In fact, the rifle that is currently being produced by the Shangjing military factory and is ready to be sold to the British and Americans cannot be regarded as a castrated version of the burst bear rifle, but an enhanced version of the Ferguson rifle. After all, this rifle does not use a rotating back-pull bolt mechanism, but uses the same rotating locking mechanism as the Ferguson rifle. However, the rifling of the barrel has been increased to 8, and the propellant is also smokeless powder, so the effective range of this gun can be increased to about 350 yards. This enhanced version of the Ferguson rifle was finally named the Mississippi Rifle by Stone Bear, meaning that this rifle was produced in a military factory on the banks of the Mississippi River. This rifle has not yet been sold to the outside world, but Shi Xiong is very clear that in terms of rifles used by European powers, once the Mississippi rifle is launched, it will inevitably lead to looting by these powers. Boss, do you really intend to sell the Mississippi rifles to those Vasicas? Will this affect our future recovery of the 13 colonies? After all, the effective range of this rifle is about 350 yards. It poses a great threat to our soldiers, Bighorn Sheep asked with some worry. Shi Xiong looked at the worried Bighorn Sheep, smiled and said, "Is the Ferguson rifle no threat to us? The bighorn sheep was suffocated by the question, and then nodded with a wry smile. Well, I think too much. Shi Xiong nodded with satisfaction. The reason why I ordered the development of the Mississippi rifle a few years ago was to prepare for this war on the one hand, and to transform our grizzly soldiers on the other. Shi Xiong stood up, walked in front of the map, and gestured on the map with his hands, saying, although we have already laid down such a big place, don't forget who is the enemy we faced before? They are all holding cold hands, enemies of weapons. They simply pose no threat to the soldiers of the grizzlies, so our grizzlies can be invincible and invincible. But, now and in the future, the enemies we face are Vasicus who are also holding heat weapons. The stone bear's fingers drew a circle on the 13th colony on the east coast, and the soldiers of our Grim Bear army we will also face those Vasicus on this battlefield. Therefore, from now on, our grizzly soldiers should begin to change the mentality that they used to be able to scare the enemy to collapse by shooting and shooting. We in the future, the soldiers will face Vasiku who can also kill people with a single shot. We can no longer be as unscrupulous as before. Bighorn, sheep, fast horse, bones beer, including hard bones, all nodded silently. In fact, the effective range of the Ferguson rifle is enough to threaten our soldiers, not to mention that those Vasicus still have bullets in their hands. Therefore, the enemies our soldiers will face in the future will be weakened versions. The Grim Bear Army. If our fighting methods still remain psychologically unchanged, then we will definitely suffer, Joe La Cruz asked. Boss, if that's the case, why should we sell them better Mississippi rifles? Isn't this just making ourselves trouble? Stone Bear looked at Kara Clelu, and then at the senior commanders of the Grim Bear Army present, and said, our Grim Bear soldiers will face more than just the tiles living on this continent in the future. Zichu, they have to face the great powers on the other side of the ocean. Therefore, we must continue to train our Grim Bear Army soldiers from now on, so that they can adapt to face stronger enemies as soon as possible. What I want is not a violent bear army that can only dominate the North American continent. What I want is a violent bear army that can defeat those European powers. This process requires blood and lives, but we can't just because retreat at this heavy price and fear. We must face this price bravely, so that our Grim Bear Army can become a truly powerful army. Shi Xiong's words made Kuaoma and the others clenched their fists tightly. Only then did they realize how high and long-term their boss's vision was. Okay, let's not talk about it. Shi Xiong waved his hand. When I return to Beijing, I will hold a military meeting to elaborate on this matter. It is good that you are prepared now. Well, we will continue. Discuss the sale of arms. Boss, besides the Mississippi rifle, is the Grenadier also on the list of munitions available for sale? Bighorn Sheep asked. But compared to the worry just now, the Bighorn Sheep now has no worries at all, and even the throwing of the bullet cannot make him worry anymore. Yes, the Grenadier is also on the list. After all, this weapon has been circulating for a long time. Even if we don't sell it, the Americans and the British have a lot of grenades. So, this thing is for us. There is no need to keep it anymore. Shi Xiong recognized the Bighorn Sheep's problem. The Kuema on the sign laughed and said, Commander, what our boss actually wants to sell is ammunition, not the tossing canister. www.wuxiaspa.com. Shi Xiong smiled and clicked Kuema. Kuema is right. Stone bears are more willing to take out ammunition than to take out weapons such as grenadiers. A rifle or a bullet canister can be used for a long time, but ammunition is an out-and-out consumable. Whether it's a bullet or a grenade used for a bullet-throwing barrel, even a low-intensity battle will consume a lot of ammunition. If there are several high-intensity and large-scale battles, the ammunition consumed will inevitably be a jaw-dropping number. So, ammunition is the big money maker. And compared to rifles and grenades, ammunition is more difficult to imitate. In terms of the current technology of the European powers, it is not difficult at all to imitate a bear rifle or a bullet toss, but they are blinded by the ammunition. Don't talk about smokeless gunpowder. The European powers have not even come up with a perfect formula for black powder that has been used for hundreds of years. So Shi Xiong is not worried that the formula for smokeless gunpowder will be imitated by European powers. Firearms and other things can be imitated, but the formula of gunpowder cannot be imitated. Whether it is Xiaohua's medicine or smokeless gunpowder, even the effects of bitterness have been unintentionally discovered. Therefore, if there were no coincidences, these advanced gunpowder would be impossible to discover. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 580, Idonin number 039 T go to who goes to hell. This meeting lasted for a whole day, and finally agreed on the list of materials and arms that can be sold. In this list, the highlight is naturally ammunition. Relying on the fact that smokeless gunpowder is still impossible to be developed by European alchemists or scientists, Shi Xiong decided to sell this kind of gunpowder that is a century ahead of this era. Of course, the most widely used weapon of smokeless powder is the tossing barrel. This weapon can't be said to be an obsolete weapon for the Grim Bear army now, but more and more 55 mortars and larger caliber mortars appear. Plus the range of the Grim Bear rifle is about the same as the bullet barrel under the circumstances. This weapon that once made great achievements for the Grim Bear army has now become a second-line weapon. Although the grenadiers are still equipped in the army, the number is far less than that of a few years ago. The fighting method of the Grim Bear army now tends to be more and more toward the infighting and artillery method of later generations. As more and more large-caliber cannons and howitzers are equipped in the army, the artillery plows the ground before the battle, then the barrage advances slowly, and the infantry follows. If you encounter a tough attack, then the mortar, a weapon with a great ballistic curvature, comes in handy. In short, the current combat method of the Grim Bear army is to use the effective range of weapons far out of reach of the enemy to destroy the enemy outside the effective range of the enemy. So, the heavy firepower with a relatively short effective shooting distance, such as the tossing barrel, has gradually become a tasteless one. Of course, some of the special operations teams that Shi Xiong can train now are still conventional weapons. After all, this kind of weapon is light and easy to carry, and its power is not small. In some special operations, it still has many advantages that other heavy weapons can't match. But although the weapon of the grenadier has gradually become tasteless in the Grim Bear army, it is an out-and-out good thing in the hands of the European powers. This kind of weapon that can shoot accurately within 600 meters, in the current era, it is really a weapon that can be called an artifact. In terms of power, because the grenadier fires a bomb, it is even more powerful than some large-caliber naval guns or fortress guns. After all, the artillery of this era almost fires solid bullets. What power can that thing have? In addition to bombing fixed objects such as castles and military fortresses, the damage to personnel is much smaller. Even the guns mounted on the sailing battleships, because of the effective range, the two battleships must be close to each other within 200 or 300 yards. For the sailing battleship, this is almost equivalent to close hand-to-hand combat. Although the grenadiers from the Cherokee tribe have a small caliber and light weight, their shooting accuracy at a distance of 500 to 600 meters is still quite good, which is definitely better than the naval guns, fortress guns, and infantry guns currently used in various countries, are much stronger. In addition, the cost of the grenadier is too low. Even a 6-pound gun can make dozens of grenadiers. Therefore, the number of grenadiers in the armies of the European powers is extremely large. This is probably the biggest change Shi Xiong has made to European powers since he came to this world. There are more ammunition equipment, so the consumption of ammunition is naturally a very scary figure. Don't forget that the maximum firing speed of the tossing barrel can be as high as 20 to 30 rounds per minute, which is much faster than the firing speed of a rifle. Once hundreds of tossing canisters set the fire, the ammunition consumed in that minute is amazing enough. Therefore, the grenade used in the tossing barrel will inevitably be a huge gain in the future. Secondly, the sales of various daily necessities, especially cigarettes, salt, and spirits, will definitely not be worse than the sales of ammunition. Especially a special cigarette prepared by Shi Xiong specially for the Vasaches, once it is promoted, it will definitely drive those Europeans crazy. Yes, as early as a few years ago, Shi Xiong ordered the French alchemist to let Auguste start secretly studying the purification of coke. After all, the famous coke of later generations was purified from coke. Shi Xiong hesitated for a long time as to whether to release this demon, but in the end Shi Xiong decided to launch this kind of thing. Shi Xiong knows that even if he doesn't do it, Europeans will do it in more than half a century. And the Indians and European whites are originally hostile relations. On the battlefield, who is his sister will care about how you use to kill the enemy. In this hostile relationship, no matter what method is used, as long as it can kill the enemy or weaken the enemy's strength, that is a good method. It's almost dead and alive, who still works in a humane and inhumane way. Jean Auguste was one of the first 4 alchemists to follow Stone Bear. He was proficient in medicine, so he was in charge of vaccination. Later, after vaccination began to cover the entire territory controlled by the Cherokee tribe, he began to secretly study the thing. Now, Augusta Westland has purified high-purity stocks. As long as this stuff is added to cigarettes, it will flourish 100% among the European powers. Of course, Shi Xiong has also done extremely strict management of this stuff. Everyone, including R&D personnel such as Augusta, is not allowed to touch this thing privately, and this thing must not appear in the Indian territory. Once you find someone dared to do something like this in private, if you didn't say anything, pull it out and shoot for 2 hours before talking. This thing can only appear on the European side, whether it is British, American, or French, Spanish, or Dutch www.wuxiaspot.com, but it cannot only appear among Indians. Now the team led by Augusta has some inventory. As long as the British and Americans start to purchase Cherokee supplies, some of the cigarettes with added materials will inevitably appear in the middle and high-level officers in the first place, in your pocket. The price of this kind of added cigarettes is several times higher than that of ordinary cigarettes. At the beginning, ordinary soldiers would not be able to enjoy it. However, once this gadget starts to become popular over there, Shi Xiong will gradually lower the price, and strive to make this kind of added cigarettes completely popular over there in a short period of time. Well, if it can flow into Europe as soon as possible, it would be even better. In this case, Shi Xiong has completely pulled his moral bottom line from the world to hell. Be aware that in the original historical time and space, after this demon was released, it has been respected by various countries for a long time. Governments of various countries have even encouraged their own people to use this thing and listed this thing as a high-level drug. That is the case, why didn't Lao Tzu release the stuff in advance? In the words of Shi Xiong, since it has been decided to release the devil, it is better to let Lao Tzu be the devil instead of letting others release it. The Buddha said, "If I don't go to hell, who will go to hell?" Chapter 581, Return. The scheduled work has been arranged, and the time has entered mid-April. At this time, although the British lost Boston, in fact the war between the two sides has not really reached its climax. If nothing happens, next month, the Continental Army will hold the Third Continental Congress in Philadelphia and prepare to draft the Declaration of Independence. Once the Declaration of Independence is published, the Continental Army declares that the 13 colonies of North America will be separated from British jurisdiction and become independent. This will enable the War of Independence to truly enter the superb stage. Although the two sides are currently fighting lively, they still belong to the Civil War stage anyway. In the eyes of the British, the Continental Army is a group of blind chickens tossing around. As long as the British Army looks it up, they can get rid of these. The problem is that when the Continental Army, regarded by the British as buns, suddenly announced the independence of the 13 North American colonies, the nature of the matter was completely different. This is Honguago's reason. Honguago's fan of the British face. So, after the Declaration of Independence was published, this war was considered to have entered a truly superb period, and it lasted until the signing of the Paris Treaty on September 3, 1783. This time there is still a full 7.5 years. Well, if the unexpected factor of Stone Bear is added, maybe this time will be extended. However, in any case, the rolling wheels of history have come here, and Shi Xiong does not want to change the direction of the wheels too much. At most, he will push hard at the back to make this historical car go faster and faster. The momentum is getting stronger and stronger. So, after arranging things here, Shi Xiong took the guards to return to Beijing. It has been a year since I left Shangjing. During this period, the Grim Bear Army conquered all the Indian tribes living in the Great Lakes region, and also recovered the ancestral land, and found the survivors who guarded the ancestral land. This is the fruit of a tiring battle. Now, the 7th Mixed Division and the 8th Mixed Division will continue to be stationed in the Great Lakes, and then they will hand over the defense of the Great Lakes after the incoming 9th and 10th Mixed Divisions arrive. Later these two divisions return to Shangjing for repairs. The 9th Mixed Division and the 10th Mixed Division, who came to take over the defense, will use the Great Lakes as their base and continue to sweep the surrounding area. A small group of soldiers will cross the St. Lawrence River to sweep northeast, and smooth the Cree people living there. Most soldiers will sweep west and northwest from the area where the Chippewa lives. They will deal with the Cree, the Blackfoot, and the Crow who fled north. These Indian tribes living in the territories of later Canada can be said to be the last Indian tribes on this continent except the West Coast. As long as these three tribes are conquered, then this continent will be taken down completely. Although the Cree living in the territory of Canada is the tribe with the largest population and the largest control area in the entire North American Indian tribe, this tribe is relatively scattered and has insufficient core cohesion, so they are even the Iroquois and Chippewa people have beaten it several times. So even if the Grim Bear Army only dispatched a mixed division, it would be no surprise to conquer this tribe. As for the Blackfoot and Crow, they will not end up much better than Crew. If there is anything that will make it difficult to conquer these three tribes, it is the weather. It is necessary to know that the latitude of the Cree living area is approximately equal to the latitude of Lake Baikal, so the summer here is very short, and the cold weather will be the biggest difficulty for the attack of the Grim Bear soldiers. As for the Crooks who fled north and the Black-footed people in the west, although the living area is a bit southerly, it can be regarded as a high-latitude area. The cold weather will also cause great difficulties for the soldiers of the tyrannical Bear Army. However, Shi Xiong did not rigidly demand how long the Grim Bear Army officers should take to conquer these three tribes, and Shi Xiong plans to take turns to pull up the 5 mixed divisions and train troops with the help of these three tribes. So in Shi Xiong in the plan made, it takes 2 to 3 years to eliminate these three tribes. Once the soldiers of the mixing division complete this task, all the land west from the Appalachian Mountains will become the back garden of the Cherokee tribe. The Cherokee will also take advantage of this period of the outbreak of the War of Independence and step up time for development. The roads that should be built, the rivers that should be dug, the farming of the land, the production of the production. At the same time, basic people's livelihoods such as education and medical care should also be greatly improved. You don't need to reach the European level at the end of the 19th century, at least better than the current European powers. In short, Shi Xiong will take advantage of the good time of these 7 or 8 years, while severely scraping a thick layer of grease on the whites, while working hard to develop internal affairs. Once the British and Americans decide the outcome, the Cherokee tribe will sound the clarion call to unify the entire North American continent. Under the of the Guards, the Stone Bear and his party traveled southwest along the route the Guardian tribe had just walked, and finally caught up with the Guardian tribe who had arrived earlier in Pittsburgh. It has not been 20 years since Pittsburgh was just taken from the hands of the French by the British. Therefore, Pittsburgh is far from the appearance of the 9th largest city in the United States, and it is not the steel center of the United States. Now Pittsburgh is a small town surrounded by a military fortress and just a little bit of a township. www.wuxiasp.com looks tattered. This was originally a small tribe of Shawnees. Later, the strength of Shawnees was greatly reduced, and the French established Fort Duquesne here, so it was gradually occupied by European colonists. The wide Allegheny River and Monongahela River merge here to form the Ohio River. Fort Duquesne, a military fortress built by the French, stands on the east bank of the confluence of the two rivers, and a small wharf extends into the river, but dozens of inland armed transport ships belonging to the Grim Bear Army are moored on the river. If the Guardian tribe escorted by a battalion of Grim Bear soldiers made the British garrison in Pittsburgh nervous for a few days, then when the Stone Bear led thousands of Wolverine guards to Little Pittsburgh, the entire Pittsburgh it was a sensation, and the British garrisons were trembling with fright. They are afraid that these extremely sturdy Native Americans will destroy them if they disagree. However, Stone Bear is still not in the mood to take Pittsburgh. Even if abundant coal and iron resources have been discovered here, it is definitely not a good time to take Pittsburgh. Therefore, whether it is the people who guard the tribe or the Stone Bear who just arrived, they did not cross the river to Duquesne, but stationed directly on the north bank of the river, quietly waiting for the inland river armed transport ship upstream from the downstream. Take a boat down the river from here, and arrive in Shangjing in only 10 days. Chapter 582, Hero Goes Home. At the end of April, the Great Lakes region was still cold and windy, but in Shangjing, it was already warm in spring and the grasses and warblers were flying. The record of the violent Bear Army in regaining the ancestral lands and conquering the tribes of the Great Lakes region was transmitted to Shangjing by radio early, and the people living in Shangjing had already passed the stage of surprise. However, Lord Chief returned to Shangjing after a lapse of more than a year, and brought back the tribesmen who had worked hard to protect the tribe. This still caused a sensation throughout Shangjing. Just when the ship that Shi Xiong took arrived at the Shangjing port, almost all the tribesmen who could get away from the Shangjing zone gathered near the Shangjing port. They would welcome the return of the chieftain and the Guardian tribe with the most enthusiastic cheers. Accompanying the news of the Grim Bear Army's victory in the north is the information of these Guardian tribes. Now almost all the people of the tribe know that in the far Great Lakes region, there is actually a survivor who has persisted there for more than 300 years, just to protect the tribe's ancestral land. This feat of guarding the tribe did not have much reaction in other tribes, but for all Cherokee people, they are undoubtedly the heroes of the tribe. After more than a month of recuperation and adjustment, the bodies of these tribesmen of the Guardian tribe headed by the old woman Wakaya are now well restored. All of their faces are clearly rounded and their bodies are strong. Especially the dozen or so children. The scenery along the way makes their faces show the long-lost innocence and the naughty that should belong to their age. And when the fleet arrived at Shangjing port, the cheers of the sky made these bereaved people unbelievable. Whether it's the crowd like the mountains and the sea, the deafening cheers, or the magnificent city and tall buildings in the distance, all these people are sincerely shocked. Wakaya even asked Shi Xiong with some fear, "Chief, is this our royal court? How can it be so big? How can there be so many people?" Wakaya is the oldest of these survivors and the leader of the Guardian tribe, but even she, let alone seen such a scene, had never even thought that there is such a magnificent one in this world, the city and so many people. For more than 300 years, they have been struggling to survive on the small piece of land that is the ancestral land. Many people even think that the world was originally this big. Shi Xiong smiled and nodded loudly. "Wakaya, and my dear people, this is the royal court of our tribe in the capital of the Yan Huang Empire that will be established. At the same time, it will become the most important place on this land in the future, the strongest and most prosperous city. Here is the pride of our entire tribe and the pride of all Indians." These words made Wakaya and the survivors standing on the bow of the ship very excited. Their original worries disappeared completely, replaced by the same proud look on their faces. These survivors who guarded the tribe did not transfer from the Alcron fortress to the Tennessee River directly to the Gaoshu tribe, because after consultation, almost all the people who guarded the tribe wanted to visit the royal court. Naturally, Shi Xiong would not refuse this small request, let alone that they themselves should come to Beijing to accept the praise and cheers of all the tribesmen. The largest ship in the lead slowly approached the pier of Shanghai port, But Shi Xiong and the others were not in a hurry to disembark. Shi Xiong took an electric horn and gave an impromptu speech. "My dear people, you must have known the news of the great victory of the Grim Bear Army in the Northern Expedition, but here, I still want to tell you, starting from last year's Worm Month, our Grim Bear soldiers from we set off in Beijing and went all the way north. The first to conquer was the Elena. Then our Grim Bear Army soldiers divided into 3 groups and continued to attack all the way north. Finally, at the end of last year, we successfully one-chipped the 3 tribes of Wa, Ottawa and Miami." Ishikame's words caused the people below to cheer in unison with excitement again. After the cheers became quieter, Shi Xiong continued, "After taking down the 3 tribes in the south and west of the Great Lakes region, our Grim Bear soldiers spent a cold winter in the remote and cold Great Lakes region. Then last month began to attack the Hurons and Iroquois entrenched in the east and northeast of the Great Lakes region. The Hurons wisely chose to surrender, while the Iroquois chose to resist to the end. As a result, our soldiers completely defeated the Iroquois and successfully regained our ancestral land." The cheers resounding throughout the world rang out again, and this time even the guards and soldiers on the ship and the guards who had been walking with the fleet along the shore also chanted together. "This is a tribute to the heroes of the Grim Bear Army. All soldiers who have returned from the Northern Expedition are eligible to enjoy this cheer." The cheers continued for a long time. When the voice gradually weakened, Shi Xiong spoke again. "My people, when we regained the tribe's ancestors, we found some people." Shi Xiong's big hand pointed at the survivors standing on this ship and the second ship. "They are the tribes who took the initiative to stay to protect the ancestral land when our tribe was forced to leave the ancestral land and move south." At this time, the crowd below became quiet. They have long heard of the experiences of these bereaved tribesmen, but now they still want to hear the legends of these people from the great chieftain, the Son of God. I'm reading www.ukenshu.com. Before I met them, I never thought that there would be such a group of heroes in our ancestral land silently guarding our ancestral land. That's right, they are the biggest heroes of our tribe, and our tyrannical soldiers. We are all heroes that our tribe will never forget. Ishikame's tone was a little excited. "Do you know, there were only 150 of them who took the initiative to stay to protect the ancestral land, and they were tightly sealed by those Iroquois in our ancestral land, and they were not allowed to go out, so they could only stay there. It's hard to survive in a small place. The cold winter there is beyond your imagination, and they can only survive there with only a small amount of land and a small amount of prey. In many cases, they not only can't eat enough, even my own children can't be kept, but that's it. They have been there for more than 300 years, just to protect our ancestral land." Shi Xiong used a low tone to speak out what he knew in a selective manner. The clansmen on the dock suddenly made a lot of crying, and they were completely moved by the feat of guarding the tribe. So, my people, they are the greatest heroes of our tribe. Come on, with your greatest cheers. Welcome our heroes who have been away from home for more than 300 years to come home again. Come with your greatest enthusiasm. Thank them for everything they have done in these 300 years. The cheers that were much louder than before rang out again, and many people from the tribes cheered vigorously with tears in them. And these bereaved tribesmen, headed by Wakaya, are also smiling with tears. Chapter 583, Eastbound. On the second day of Shi Xiong's return, Shangjin began to spontaneously host various bonfire dinners. Of course, the grandest bonfire dinner was held in the square inches front of the Giant Bear Palace. High-level figures from the Eastern capital and the Grim Bear Army gathered in the Great Bear Palace Square to participate in this grand bonfire dinner. The bonfire dinner can be said to be a traditional project of the Cherokee and even the entire North American Indians, so even if the entire tribe has developed rapidly now, it is no longer inferior to the European powers, but this traditional bonfire dinner is still the most top-level way of dining for the entire tribe. Now there is not only the huge city of Shangjin, but also a city near the later Dallas in the southwest. This city is the southern capital. Norfolk, later in the east, also established the east capital. However, the east is a port city, and it is also where the tribe's largest shipbuilding base is located. As for the western capital, it is near Denver in later generations. These four major cities have become the metropolitan areas of their respective regions. After the Great Lakes region is taken this year, Stone Bear will establish the northern capital near Detroit in later generations. In this way, the five metropolitan areas of the four capitals in the southeast, northwest and the center of Beijing will be formed, and will eventually develop into the administrative, economic, and cultural centers of their respective regions. The high-level staff currently serving in the southern capital, eastern capital, and western capital are mostly Cherokee tribes. But there are also tribes from other tribes who have performed well. Anyway, the integration between the various tribes has progressed perfectly. Now almost no one still says you Cherokees, we Sioux people and so on. Now in the entire tribal-ruled area, except for the just conquered Great Lakes area, the tribesmen in other areas will call themselves tribal tribesmen. And this tribe, Shi Xiong did not name it after Cherokee, but a brand new name Yanhuang tribe. No one knows what the two words Yanhuang mean, but Shi Xiong knows. The Indians were originally yellow people who came from Asia, and belonged to the same ancestry as the Chinese. Moreover, Shi Xiong is an out-and-out traverser, so when how to name the tribe, Shi Xiong naturally brought the two words Yanhuang. Anyway, it is better to call it Yanhuang than to call it Europa or America. Don't forget, Lao Tzu has the final say on this continent. When Lao Tzu says the name of the tribe, what is the name of the tribe? Who dare to object? Are you going to single out or fight in groups? As long as you can beat Lao Tzu, you will call the tribe alien and Lao Tzu will recognize it. But the question is, have you ever beat me? Can't beat, then shut up honestly, and then accept the name. The grand bonfire dinner lasted for 3 days. Of course, during these 3 days, the high-level clansmen from the three major cities of the east, west, and south mainly came to report on their duties. After all, Shi Xiong has been conquering the north for more than a year. Although many things of the tribe can be controlled by radio remote control, now that they are back, the people in charge from all over the country come to pilgrimage spontaneously. That's right, in their minds, Shi Xiong is like a saint. These people in charge of things everywhere are proud to be able to see the chieftain, the Son of God with their own eyes. From their eyes, it was a process of pilgrimage to be able to see the chief, the Son of God in person. 7 or 8 days after Shi Xiong came back, the whole Shangjing gradually recovered his peace, and Shi Xiong also accompanied his family well. The only sad thing is that Sheila finally did not withstand the invasion of the years. On the afternoon of the 9th day when Shi Xiong came back, she slowly closed her eyes. In the 2 days after Sheila's death, I heard a lonely and sad roar every night throughout the capital. It was Tep. Tep grew up drinking Sheila's milk. In a way, Sheila is Tep's mother. Hekla and Tatari have been with Tep these days, but they still can't make Tep happy. In this case, Shi Xiong decided to go out for a circle again. Of course, he will take Tep and his family. Wakaya decided to go to the Gaoshu tribe, so Stone Bear planned to take this opportunity to accompany them to take a look at the Gaoshu tribe, and take a look at the cemetery of the Zio tribe to see the white clouds. Of course, going to Dongtu is also an important part of Shi Xiong's trip plan. After arranging all the matters of going to Beijing, Shi Xiong took his family, the clansmen who guarded the tribe, and the 500 guards, and set off from Shangjing by boat. 250 guards protected the stone bears on the ship, and another 250 guards escorted them on the shore with 1 man and 2 horses. After leaving the port of Shanghai and going upstream along the Mississippi River, it took a day to arrive at Fort Akron, and after resting for 1 night in the first French fortress laid down by the tribe, the fleet continued upstream along the Tennessee River and up. I want to say that the stone bear on this river is also very familiar. Back then, the Gaoshu tribe completed the most primitive accumulation through this river. In particular, the French who fooled the Akron fortress, obtained war horses, food and other materials from the French, and they did it with the help of this river. Of course, the saltpeter trade between the Zio tribe and the Gaoshu tribe was also completed by this river. The fleet is going upstream along the Tennessee River under the protection of the Guards' cavalry. It is already the hinterland of the tribe, and there is no need to worry about enemies appearing, even if there is a rebellion. Do you really think that the weapons carried by the guards and the artillery on the inland river armed transport ships are a joke? A few days later, the fleet arrived at the confluence of the Hayworth River and the Tennessee River. The Stone Bear ordered the fleet to repair here, and then took the children in Tep together with the Green Skylark, and took a boat alone along the Worthy River to go upstream www.wuxiaspot.com to the mouth of the valley where the Zio tribe is located. Here is no different from before. Taniguchi still has vigilant grizzly soldiers, and there are defensive positions on the mountains on both sides of Taniguchi. The valley where the Zio tribe is located is still a very important saltpeter production area for the tribe. There is a battalion of Grim Bear soldiers stationed here, and there are hundreds of miners who specialize in mining saltpeter. The Stone Bear and the Green Skylark, one by one, led their children, and Tet followed on foot, and slowly entered the valley. The former houses of the Zio tribe are now the places where the miners live. At the end of the river valley is the saltpeter mine. It's just that their family didn't stay here too much. Instead, accompanied by the Grim Bear camp stationed here, Chang Das Han, they quietly passed through here and came to the cemetery at the Haoshan Mountain Call. Das Han is Shi Xiong's old friend. This man with excellent archery skills used to be the first archer of the Zio tribe, and he was highly valued by Thunder Eagle. Later, Shi Xiong formed an expedition team to retaliate against Yu Chiren, and Das Han was one of them. However, the scale of the Grim Bear army became larger and larger. With Das Han's qualifications, it's okay for him to be the commander of the main division, but he didn't do that. The battalion commander has also been guarding the Zio tribe. Here, only Da Shan is qualified to accompany the Stone Bear family to the tribe's cemetery. Green Skylark's father, Lei Ying, and her sister, Bei Yun, a woman who is unforgettable for Stone Bear's lifetime, are buried here. Next to them is the Zio tribe who died in the Yuchi attack. Chapter 584. Go back to the high tree. The memorial ceremony always makes people feel heavy. Even though Bei Yun and Lei Ying have passed away for 10 years, whenever Stone Bear and Green Skylark stand here, both of them will be in grief. If Abba and sister were still alive, how happy our family would be, Green Skylark said to her husband next to her with tears in her eyes and longing. Yeah. Ishikama murmured in response, but he couldn't say anything. Hekla and Tatari were also crying in low voices. They were still young and didn't understand the meaning of the memorial ceremony, but they could feel the sadness from their parents and started crying involuntarily. Green Skylark touched the heads of the two children, and then whispered, "Let's bury Sheila here too. Our family has a share of it." Shi Xiong nodded silently, picked up the iron shovel on the side and started digging a hole nearby. Sheila is now in a small clay pot. And now the weather is starting to get hot. The Stone Bear can only burn Sheila into ashes and put it in a clay pot. Tep seems to understand something. Seeing that the old man dug a hole to bury the earthenware pot with Sheila's ashes, he meant to do nothing, and screamed sadly while holding the thigh of the Stone Bear. However, whether it is a human or an animal, it is always good to go into the soil for safety. In the end, Sheila was buried in a pit dug by the Stone Bear himself, and a small stone tablet was erected. On it was the tomb of the loyal dog Sheila ridden by the Stone Bear in Chinese. I stayed in the cemetery for most of the morning. When the Shi Xiong and his family came out, they saw from a distance the people who were mining and the soldiers of the Grim Bear army stood up, watching their hearts from a distance. The greatest chief in China. Obviously, the news that Shi Xiong came here has been known by these hard-working people. Many of these tribesmen were originally from the Zio tribe, but most of these people are older and unwilling to leave here, so they continue to live here. They naturally know who is buried in the cemetery behind the mountain, and they also know that their chieftain comes here almost every year, so they are used to it. It's just those tribesmen who have never seen a Stone Bear and the soldiers of the Grim Bear army. All of them are excited like something, but due to etiquette, they can only pay attention to salute from a distance. Under such circumstances, the Stone Bear naturally cannot leave, and there is Stone Bear's old friend Das Han here, so the family stayed in the Zio tribe for lunch at noon. Chief's approach was naturally welcomed by all the tribesmen and the Grim Bear soldiers. They brought out the best food and drinks to entertain their great chief. Some old people in the tribe who had known Shi Xiong's family long ago accompanied them, and they were also embarrassed during the conversation. In the afternoon, the Shi Xiong family returned to the Tennessee River by boat and merged with the fleet. Then the fleet continued to sail upstream and arrived at the Gaoshu tribe 2 days later. Like the Xiao tribe, the Gaoshu tribe is still inhabited, but they are all elderly people from the Gaoshu tribe. They were also reluctant to leave the tribe that had lived here all their lives, so they insisted on staying. On the one hand, it is to take care of the Gaoshu tribe. On the other hand, the Gaoshu tribe also has a lot of good jobs to do, and they live very well here. Gaoshu tribe can be said to be the origin of the entire Yanhuang tribe, so here is still guarded by the generals of the Grim Bear army. It's just that the number of people is not large. Only one company is about 100 people. These blizzard soldiers stationed here are all children of the Gaoshu tribe. They usually spend half a day in training every day, and the rest of the time is to work hard with the elders of the clan staying here. The refined salt, alcohol, peanut oil, white noodles, and high-end cigarettes produced by the Gaoshu tribe are highly sought-after items on the market. At present, the salt, wine, peanut oil, and cigarettes used by the entire Yanhuang tribe and Europeans all originated from here. In addition, this is the place where the chief of the Son of God lived. These things are all personally used by the chief of the Son of God. Come out, so the various products produced here naturally bring a sacred and high-level aperture. So even if the Gaoshu tribe produces not many things every year, it is extremely popular. Ordinary people can't see the things produced by the Gaoshu tribe at all. These things can only appear in the hands of high-level people, whether they are in the tribe, in the European continent or in the colonies. Therefore, the more than 300 tribes who live here and the 100 tyrannical soldiers and soldiers live here very well. When Stone Bear took the hundreds of people who guarded the tribe and traveled thousands of kilometers to this quiet and comfortable place, the tribesmen who guarded the tribe, headed by Wakaya, immediately fell in love with it. Uncle Grey Moose and Li Lei, the former leader of the Gaoshu tribe, still live here. The Grey Moose, who is 60 years old this year, is considered a longevity among the entire tribe, but the veteran soldier is still very strong and full of breath. Lai was the leader of the Gaoshu tribe a long time ago. When Jao brought the Stone Bears and others who fled to the Gaoshu tribe, Lai nodded and agreed before they could gain a foothold in the Gaoshu tribe. Later, Li Lei was ousted from the position of tribal leader by Hong Yun for this and other reasons www.wuxiaspa.com and was replaced by Li Lei's younger brother Daijiao as the tribal leader of the Gaoshu tribe, and became the leader of the tribe. Lei was completely settled down. After the tribe moved, Li Lei, who had seen through many things and became peaceful and quiet, also did not follow to Beijing, but took the initiative to stay and lead the tribes who stayed here with the Grey Moose. Obviously, Li Lei and Grey Moose did a great job. They have managed this place into a real paradise. Now Li Lei has no resentment towards Shi Xiong anymore. The changes in the tribe over the years have long since convinced him. Strong Bear, these people are. However, Li Lei's name for the Stone Bear is still the same as before. It wasn't that he couldn't change his words, but because Li Lei felt unnecessary. He still calls Shi Xiong that way, and he treats Shi Xiong as his own junior, just like Shi Xiong's uncle Jiao Niu. Shi Xiong didn't mind Li Lei's name, but he liked it very much. After all, there are fewer and fewer people who can call him that way. Shi Xiong smiled and said, "Uncle Lai, these people are also the real people of our Gaoshu tribe. They were also from the line of the Kabru high priest before, but more than 300 years ago." Shi Xiong whispered to Li Lei and the Grey Moose about the origins of Wakaya and the others, and sighed Li Lei and the Grey Moose. Of course, they immediately accepted Wakaya and the others. Chapter 585, East Norfolk, Part 1. Facts have proved that Stone Bear's decision to send Wakaya and the tribesmen who guard the tribe to the Gaoshu tribe was extremely wise. This place was built by the high priest Kabru, and this is the real home of the high priest Kabru. and Wakaya, and they are also the direct line of the high priest of Kabru. We must know that the ancestor who took the initiative to leave to guard the ancestral land back then, but the next Kabru high priest appointed by the imperial court, if she did not insist on staying to protect the ancestral land, then she was the high priest of Kabru. But this kind of thing is difficult to say, but in any case, Wakaya and the others are absolutely Kabru high priests, and no one can deny this. And Wakaya also knows that this is the tribe established by the Kabul high priest himself after the tribe moved south, and the tribe of Kabul high priest has lived here for more than 200 years. When they came here, they really went home. Moreover, in addition to the guards of the Grim Bear army soldiers in the Gaoshu tribe, most of the others here are people who are unwilling to leave here, mainly the elderly and women. Wakaya and the others are also in the same situation. They are all old and weak, women and children, so they can blend in here faster. Stone Bear and the others stayed in the Gaoshu tribe for 3 days. They watched Wakaya quickly integrate into the tribe. Only then did they feel relieved to leave here and continue to the east. This trip to the Stone Bear was not only to pay tribute to Baiyun and Thunder Eagle, nor was it not only to send the people who guarded the tribe to the Gaoshu tribe. He had more important things, and that was to go to the eastern capital of Norfolk. Even if Norfolk has penetrated into the 13th colony, Stone Bear did not take the Green Skylark and the 3 wives, but left them in the Gaoshu tribe. Be aware that except for Heckle, who lived in the Gaoshu tribe for a few months, Tatari has never lived in the Gaoshu tribe. And with the addition of the Guardian tribe, there are now many children in the Gaoshu tribe. Putting Heckle and Tatari here will surely make their brothers and sisters spend a wonderful summer. After all arrangements were made, Shi Xiong led the 500 guards and began to march eastward. The Hard Bones who personally accompany the Stone Bear will also follow the Stone Bear to Norfolk. Hard Bone is not only the commander of the guards, but also the commander of the Navy. Although he has delegated many things for the Navy to his subordinates in the past 2 years, and has shifted the focus of his work to the guards, he still bears the name of a Navy commander. Therefore, before Shi Xiong can choose the next Navy commander, he must also take care of the important matters of the Navy side. For example, if I go to Norfolk this time, I must go to the Hard Bones. Because there was news from Norfolk that it was the first ironclad battleship to use steam engines as power to launch. The shipbuilding plan of a warship with a steam engine as power and steel as a hull was secretly launched at the Norfolk Naval Harbor Shipyard 8 years ago. However, this kind of unprecedented steel battleship has never been in contact with even those skilled workers dug from major European shipyards. If it weren't for Shi Xiong's golden fingers to point out from time to time, this kind of steel battleship would not know how long it would take. It takes time to build successfully. But even with Stone Bear's golden fingers, this steel battleship used for experimentation took 8 years to barely launch. But this is undoubtedly a big deal for the Stone Bear and the entire Yanhuang tribe. Shi Xiong, who knows the power of steel battleships, knows very well that once such battleships can really form combat effectiveness, then the 4 oceans around the world will become bathing pools for the Yanhuang tribe. Before a breakthrough in space technology, no one could know the importance of sea power better than Shi Xiong. Even in later generations, sea power is still one of the core interests of all countries. The Yanhuang tribe was originally hundreds of years behind the European powers in terms of sea power, so if they want to catch up with or even surpass the European powers, they must find another way. Therefore, a new type of warship that uses a steam engine as power and steel as a hull has become the killer of the Stone Bear. Now that the assassin's key is a little bit more eye-catching, Shi Xiong must go over and take a look. The eastern capital of Norfolk is directly east of the Gaoshu tribe, and the straight line distance between the two places exceeds 700 kilometers. But if you want to go from the Gaoshu tribe to the eastern capital of Norfolk, you have to cross the Blue Ridge, so the journey far exceeds 700 kilometers. But this route has long been mature, because the trade group led by Major Hank came to the Gaoshu tribe to exchange salt, and it has been following this route. Jamestown, where Major Hank was stationed, was not far from Norfolk, the eastern capital. Stone Bear has also traveled this route twice. The Expeditionary Army also took this route when they fought the Powhatan people. Ishikama and the others were all cavalry troops on this trip. Coupled with the mature route, they moved extremely fast. In just 4 days, they ran a distance of more than 800 kilometers and arrived in Norfolk, the eastern capital. Norfolk is located in the southern part of the Chesapeake Bay, the largest bay in the later generations of the United States, where it is the largest naval base in the later generations of the United States. Later generations. This large area including Norfolk has a very famous name: Hampton Anchorage. www.wuxiasput.com. This huge naval base covering an area of more than 36,000 acres relies on the natural nature of the mouth of the James River. The deepwater port was completed and became the largest naval base in the later generations of the United States, including Norfolk Naval Base, Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Little Creek Naval Amphibious Base, Oceana Naval Air Base and Yorktown Naval Weapons Base. It was also the location of the 5th Military District Command of the U.S. Navy, the Atlantic Fleet Command, the Tactical Air Force Command, the Continental Army Command, and the headquarters of the Army Transportation Center. It is no exaggeration to say that in later generations, this is the military center of the United States. But in this era, this place is far from being comparable to the Hampton Anchorage in later generations. Now in this area, in addition to Jamestown, Britain's earliest permanent colony in North America, there are now Williamsburg, the capital of the Virginia colony, and the prosperous seaport Yorktown. The current Williamsburg is not the small city of Williamsburg in later generations, since Williamsburg, which replaced Jamestown as the capital of the Virginia colony in 1699, can now be listed as the 4 major political, military and economic centers of North America alongside Boston, New York and Philadelphia. But whether it's Williamsburg or Jamestown or Yorktown, it has nothing to do with Stone Bear now, although he had been to Jamestown and Williamsburg when he was fighting for the Powhatans before. He really didn't bother to pay attention to those 2 small cities this time. His destination is Norfolk, the eastern capital of the Yan-Huang tribe on the south bank of the James River estuary. Chapter 586, East Norfolk, Part 2. When Stone Bear and the others passed by Richmond, they did not enter Richmond, but whizzed past Richmond Fortress. But even so, the British soldiers stationed in Richmond were very nervous. Richmond is not the capital of the later American state of Virginia. This military fortress, which was established in 1733, has only developed for more than 40 years. It has only developed into a small village based on the Richmond fortress. Its scale is not only not as good as Williamsburg and Jamestown, and even Yorktown, which is at the mouth of the York River, is far inferior. There are only a few hundred British troops stationed in Richmond. It serves as a bridgehead protruding to the west of Williamsburg, Yorktown and Jamestown to provide early warning for these 3 important cities to the British. And now, the independence fire has swept through the entire 13 colonies of North America, especially the Continental Army, which has engulfed some scattered Indian tribes fighting, which made the British soldiers stationed in Richmond think that the Stone Bears were helping the Continental Army. Native Indians. Located on the north bank of the middle reaches of the James River, this military fortress is a must-pass to Williamsburg, Jamestown and Yorktown. However, Stone Bear and their destination was not a British city, so after bypassing Richmond, they chose a slower section of the James River on the north bank of the James River to cross the James River, and then continue to the east. Go ahead. Walking along the wider and wider James River to the southeast, reaching the mouth of the river, we arrived at Norfolk, the eastern capital of the Yan-Huang tribe. This is actually the location of the Norfolk Naval Port in the later generations of the United States. When Stone Bear led the Expeditionary Army to the east of the Powhatans, Colonel Jones asked for this place at the mouth of the James River. At that time, this place was still a savage area, and there was only a small tribe of Paimanji people here. At that time, the relationship between the Cherokee tribe and the British was very good, and at that time, The colonists of the 13 colonies in North America did not have such a rigid relationship with the British, so the Cherokee tribe was building the eastern capital of Norfolk. At that time, I also got a lot of help from the British. A few years before the construction of Norfolk, the Cherokee people in Norfolk had a very busy transaction with the local British. Cigarettes, refined salt, alcohol, and oils produced in the Gaoshu tribe are extremely popular in this area. Of course, at that time, the British and the transactions between the colonists and the Cherokees in Norfolk were mostly scattered transactions. It was the Cherokees who took out the salt, cigarettes, and alcohol that they could not use. Vasiku's transaction is not very large. Large-scale transactions were monopolized by Colonel Jones and later Baron William Hank. Later, as Colonel Jones left Jamestown and the large-scale deal with the Cherokee tribe, Baron Hank was completely in the hands of Baron Hank. However, when Stone Bear decided to set up a shipyard in Norfolk 8 years ago and secretly research new warships, it became a military forbidden area. Although there are more than 30,000 members of the Yan tribe living here, the 4th Division of the Grim Bear Army led by Day has also been stationed here, making it a very large gathering place with close to 50,000 people living. But the Yan here in the past 8 years, the tribesmen have never traded privately with the British. Stone Bear's order is very strict. People living in Norfolk are forbidden from contacting Vasiku. Anyone who dares to violate this prohibition, if not said, will be sent to the mine to serve for 5 years by soldiers of the Grim Bear Army. The prestige of Shi Xiong in the tribe is naturally needless to say. The ban he personally promulgated was complied with by most members of the tribe. However, some tribesmen who were greedy for petty and cheap did not abide by the ban at the beginning, and were immediately taken by the 4th Division. The soldiers arrested a lot, and then all the tribesmen were honest. In fact, these people living here can be said to have no worries about eating, drinking and wearing. Although Norfolk, the eastern capital, is close to the sea, the soil and water are fertile. Whether it is growing food or hunting and fishing, there are excellent harvests here. And in order to build this port city well, when the royal court of the Cherokee tribe moved to the capital, this is the place where the whole tribe fully supplies. It is no exaggeration to say that the supply of supplies in Norfolk is not even worse than that in Beijing. The reason for this is that Shi Xiong wants to build a seaport city with strong defense and military power here in a short time, and build it into the first seaport of the Yan tribe on the Atlantic coast. The strong supply of these years has not been in vain. Now the eastern capital of Norfolk has a certain scale, and the defense work has been perfected with the efforts of the soldiers of the 4th Division. The range of the eastern capital of Norfolk starts from the Nansemond River in the west and reaches the coastline in the east. Its core location is near the Elizabeth River. The Nansemond River to the west is the first line of defense in the eastern capital of Norfolk, but this line of defense is more of a vigilance. After all, starting from the Nansemond River to the east, the area of this area is close to 1,000 square kilometers. Such a large area obviously cannot be fully guarded. So, with the help of this river located at the mouth of the James River, it is good to establish a cordon. As for the real defensive core, it is on the banks of the Elizabeth River further east. In fact, the core of the later American Hampton anchorage, that is, the Norfolk Naval Port, was built with the Elizabeth River as the core. Since the Americans in the previous life did a good job, Shi Xiong didn't mind carrying the American practices. After all, the former Norfolk Naval Port is so famous. www.wuxiaspot.com. There is a suspension bridge on the Nansemond River. This bridge is used to transport supplies. Because the Yan tribe does not yet have the ability to transport supplies to Norfolk by water, so the transportation of supplies to Norfolk can only be carried out by land. On this sling bridge, Shi Xiong met the generals of the 4th Division who had been stationed in Norfolk. The teacher is Day. Day was formerly the Kui with the highest strength among the 4 warriors of the Crooked Deer tribe, Kui, and later joined the Expeditionary Army. Because of his steady personality, Shi Xiong was appointed as the logistics supervisor of the Expeditionary Army. Day did a very good job in this position. Later, after the Expeditionary Army expanded into the Grim Bear Army, Day became the commander of the 4th Division. Are the first group of people who followed Shi Xiong, and they did a great job. Shi Xiong has no reason not to use them. Because of his stable personality, Day was placed in Norfolk by Stone Bear and guarded Norfolk here. Although stationed in Norfolk, he could not fight with the Stone Bears in the north and south, and could only be aggrieved near Norfolk, which is not too big, but Day and his 4th Division have always done well. For 8 years, he was motionless. In addition to completing daily training tasks, he was a good guarantee of the safety of Norfolk. Therefore, even if the 4th Division did not participate in the Cherokee expedition, their contribution is not small at all. Just look at Norfolk in front of you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 587, Excellent Defensive Position. The eastern capital, Norfolk, is located on the east bank of the estuary of the Elizabeth River, which almost overlaps with the future Norfolk Naval Port. But compared to the Norfolk Naval Port of the later American Navy, the port built by the Yen and Huang tribes in Norfolk is a bit closer. The later Norfolk military port was very large, and the deep water wharf located at the outermost side of the mouth of the Elizabeth River was dedicated to docking aircraft carriers. For example, the famous Pier 14 and Pier 12. A little bit closer to the inner pier, that is, from Pier 10 inward to Pier 4, most of the Burke-class destroyers docked. The docks in Xiangli are dedicated docks for submarines. In general, the future Norfolk Naval Port was located at the mouth of the Elizabeth River. Once the warship leaves the port, it will turn north to enter the mouth of the James River, and then enter the Chesapeake Bay through the Symbolshire Strait, and then enter the Atlantic Ocean through the Chesapeake Bay. Generally speaking, because the Norfolk Naval Port is located in the interior of the bay, and the channel at the mouth of the Elizabeth River is very deep, it became the largest naval base of the American Navy in later generations. Such an excellent natural deep-water harbor, Stone Bear would naturally not let it go, so the construction of Norfolk, the eastern capital, was started here. However, because the 13th colony has not yet been recovered, the entire Chesapeake Bay cannot be recovered now. Therefore, the current Norfolk port cannot be too close to the mouth of the James River. It can only be built at a distance from the mouth of the Elizabeth River, next to the river bank, in the course of the later Norfolk and Portsmouth. There is a straight line distance of more than 10 kilometers from the James River. This long distance, coupled with the shore-based fortresses built along the banks of the river, is sufficient to defend against all attacks by foreign enemies. Although it is far from the mouth of the river, the depth of the river is still sufficient. The 4th ship of the Iowa-class battleship built by the later American Navy during World War II, the battleship Wisconsin, was docked at this location. That is a super battleship with a full load and displacement of more than 50,000 tons. Therefore, it is more than enough to serve as the Atlantic port of the Yan Huang tribe. And the West Bank, about 2 kilometers south of the Elizabeth River from Norfolk Port, is where the Norfolk shipyard is located. The Dusty Stone Bear and the others, accompanied by Day and other senior leaders of the 4th Division, first came to Norfolk. After all, this is the eastern capital designated by Shi Xiong, and the supplies have been very sufficient over the years, so Norfolk is still very good now. Maybe it's not as good as Shangjin, but the gap is not much bigger. And the defense here is very well done. Along the way, Shi Xiong saw no fewer than 30 places just by erecting a 105mm fort around Norfolk. In addition to the most advanced 105 cannon of the Yan Huang tribe, there are also many shooting positions for the 76 guns and 76 mortars. It can be said that under the supply of almost no cost in these years, Norfolk has become an iron hedgehog with no way of speaking. If anyone doesn't have long eyes and dare to come over and find fault, just these 105 heavy guns with a range of more than 10 kilometers are enough to make them understand why the pot is made of iron. Although later generations distinguished artillery calibers, Artillery over 122 mm was considered a heavy artillery, and 105 mm artillery could only be regarded as a medium-caliber artillery. But in this era, the 105 mm artillery can definitely be regarded as the most difficult heavy artillery. Although there are larger caliber naval guns and fortress guns in this era, let alone the 105 heavy guns of the Yan Huang tribe, even the 55 mortars of the Grizzly Army can completely destroy those that can only fire solid shells. Artillery. Although the number of 105 heavy artillery guns of the Yan Huang tribe is not much, and the heavy artillery weighing 2 tons is not even equipped with the 1st Division of the Grim Bear Army, they are all used in the Norfolk and Shangjing defensive positions, but with 76 guns, and the mortar is more than enough to defend Norfolk. Like this kind of 105 heavy artillery that can be used as a weapon in town, even if the European powers come to a battleship fleet, they will definitely not be able to withstand the 105 heavy artillery bombardment. Don't look at the current sailing battleships of the European powers being blown so big, but if it is against the 105 heavy artillery, it will definitely be scum. Even the first-class battleships of European powers, if they were hit by a few rounds of this 105 heavy artillery, they could directly tear a first-class battleship to pieces. The best sailing battleship in this era is just a sailing battleship, a wooden battleship. The 105 heavy artillery fired a shell filled with nearly 3 kilograms of high explosives Yahuzhang. This thing is just like playing a wooden battleship. It is not an exaggeration to say that the 105 heavy artillery developed by the Yan Huang tribe may not be as powerful as the Krupp 105 artillery during World War I, but it is definitely not much worse. Using this heavy artillery to hit the current sailing battleship, to be honest, Shi Xiong himself felt that he was bullying. Anyway, under the leadership of Day, the 4th Division has done a great job in protecting Norfolk. Even if Shi Xiong looked at Norfolk's fortifications with the eyes of future generations, he couldn't fault it. The reason why Norfolk was able to have the current defense measures in just 8 years, there is no other reason, because under the order of the Stone Bear, the entire tribe spared no effort to provide. It can be said that this seaport city was made forcibly with the power of the entire tribe. Can get this kind of care www.wuxiasput.com among the entire Yan Huang tribe. Apart from going to Beijing, there is only Norfolk. The arrival of the Chief, the Son of God, made the entire Norfolk completely hot. Those tribes who had lived and worked step by step, after learning that the Chief had come to Norfolk, almost all of them were dispatched, wanting to take a closer look at this great Chief. There are many tribesmen who were previously conquered by the Grim Bear Army led by the Stone Bear, but after these years of assimilation, they have long forgotten their previous tribes. Now this beautiful life has made these people completely regard themselves as members of the Yan Huang tribe, and no one wants to live the life of the past without food. As usual, a grand bonfire dinner was held in the Emirates Square inches this port city on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Tens of thousands of people gathered in the Emirates Square on this evening, and enjoyed a wonderful night with the great chieftain, the Son of God. Chief's Square is named after Shi Xiong, the chief of the tribe. At the center of the square is an 8-meter-high sculpture that was carved by an artist from Europe for 3 years. This sculpture is the image of a stone bear riding a fire and phoenix bow and arching an arrow. It is extremely realistic. This is also the area with the most traffic in the city every day, and a large number of people come here to worship this sculpture every day. Now, under this sculpture, these Yan Huang tribe members finally captured a real chieftain of the Son of God. Chapter 588, Adrian Carlos. The next day, Stone Bear and Hard Bones, accompanied by Day, quietly arrived at the Norfolk shipyard, 2 kilometers away from Norfolk. This shipyard does not occupy a large area. After all, it is only an experimental shipyard. Of course, a large enough place has been reserved around this shipyard. Once the shipyard can make breakthrough progress, then this small shipyard can be expanded many times at any time. In fact, This shipyard is not just as simple as a shipyard. It can be said to be a comprehensive processing base similar to the Dikingshan base back then. Here, there are not only dry docks for shipbuilding, but also many other supporting workshops, for example, steel smelting workshop, such as machining workshop, such as precision casting and processing workshop. So many workshops are concentrated in this small area, which makes it seem a little messy and noisy. In addition, the steel-making blast furnaces and coke ovens are constantly spitting out black smoke, making it even more messy. However, the sight here makes Shi Xiong very pleased, because even he can feel a strong industrialization taste from this busy and noisy factory. This is the scenery that Shi Xiong dreams of. Although this so-called industrialization is far from being compared with any self-employed machining enterprise in later generations, in this era, it represents the coming of real industrialization. Shi Xiong doesn't know what the factory on the European continent looked like at this time, but Shi Xiong knows that this factory, made forcibly with the power of the entire tribe, already possesses the original historical time and space in the middle and late 19th century industrial capabilities. This shipyard or industrial base does not seem to be as big as the Dikingshan base or the Shangjing base, but Shi Xiong knows that the technology condensed in this industrial base far exceeds the Dikingshan base and the Shangjing base. Moreover, there are also the most elite scientific research teams under Shi Xiong, including Jack Williams, who is proficient in mechanical manufacturing, and David Adian, who is proficient in metal smelting. The two of the first four King Kong II have always been here. In addition, there is a shipbuilding engineer who was dug over by the Fernando family, the Spaniard Adrian Carlos, who has also worked here for 6 full years. This Adrian Carlos is also a man with real abilities. Apart from anything else, the second-level sailing battleship San Carlos of the Royal Spanish Navy, launched in 765, has a credit for Mr. Carlos. The sailing battleship San Carlos, launched in 765, is a second-class sailing battleship with a displacement of 74 tons and 94 artillery. It holds a pivotal position in the current Spanish Royal Navy. In the original historical time and space, this ship was upgraded to a first-class sailing battleship with 2 artillery in 0 years. And this Mr. Carlos was deeply involved in the shooting and construction of the San Carlos. When he was involved in the design and construction of the San Carlos, he was only 25 years old, and he was definitely a shipbuilding genius. It's a pity that this civilian-born engineer has a very beautiful wife. When the San Carlos was launched, the Royal Spanish Navy held a grand launching ceremony and also invited many people who participated in the design and construction of this warship. The engineers came to watch the ceremony. The bridge section is very bloody. Mr. Carlos took his wife to attend this celebration, and then his wife was photographed by the son of a certain nobleman. Although Mr. Carlos has an outstanding talent in shipbuilding and his wife loves her very much, none of these things can withstand the tremendous pressure from money and power. Mr. Carlos, who originally received a big reward for building the San Carlos, has begun to get better, but under the operation of the noble son, Mr. Carlos's family property was inexplicably confiscated. My wife also disappeared while shopping. What can be called a family ruin in just a few days, almost driving the young Carlos crazy. Later, he learned from his friends that it was the son of the nobleman who caused all this, and his wife was also taken away by the son of the nobleman. This time, Carlos is really red-eyed. But he couldn't beat that nobleman's son again. So he planned for a long time, seized an opportunity, and stabbed the noble son 7 times with a knife in the street of Madrid. Carlos was arrested and sentenced to hang. But just a few days before the execution of the hanging, Felisa Fernando learned the news. Where was Felisa looking for the shipbuilding talent for the warship in the first place? After all, even in the Kingdom of Spain, such engineers who can design and build ships are all treasures of the Navy. Ordinary shipbuilders are easy to find, but this kind of talent is really hard to find. So when Felisa learned the news of Adrian Carlos, he immediately used the family relationship to seek out Mr. Carlos. Although the nobleman is quite powerful, It is far from the Fernando family. Under the great pressure of the Fernando family, Mr. Carlos was successfully sent to the ship across the Atlantic by Felisa. Adrian Carlos has thus become an important figure under Stone Bear, and Shi Xiong also gave him full power. www.wuxiaspot.com let him preside over the design and construction of the new steel battleship in Norfolk. Originally, Carlos had no intention of doing this kind of work anymore, but when he heard the idea of a new style steel battleship from the amazing chieftain, Carlos was really moved. A warship that uses a steam engine as power, propellers as propellers, and steel as a hull. This is a ship he had never even thought of before, and if such a ship could be built from one's own hands, it would be a wonderful thing. So, Adrian Carlos was abducted by the Stone Bear on the thief ship, after receiving the instructions of the chief, and after 6 years of arduous design and construction, this ship is now dark but shining. The battleship of steel light is finally about to be launched. Although this ship has concentrated the efforts of thousands of people, Carlos knows very well that the main credit for the ship's launch in just 6 years comes from the magical chieftain, the son of God. Carlos really didn't understand. The chief was obviously an Indian native, but why did he know so much? Steel keel, watertight cabin scheme, propeller, steel riveting technology. Without the guidance of the magic chieftain time and time again, Carlos knew very well that this ship could not be successfully built in such a short period of time. Anyway, the ship is now ready to launch, but Carlos is not too happy about it. There is only one thing he wants to do now, and that is to ask how the miraculous chieftain knows all this. Chapter 589, Norfolk Shipyard. Shi Xiong didn't rush to the dry dock to see the iron ship that had been built. Instead, he made a circle around the base with the hard bones and the big river. Of course, Jack Williams, David Adrian and Adrian Carlos were also accompanied. Williams and Adrian were among the first 4 alchemists to follow Stone Bear, but they no longer call themselves alchemists, but call themselves scientists. In fact, with their current inventions, they are more qualified to hold the title of scientist than most of the so-called scientists in Europe. Among other things, look at the white glowing molten steel in the workshop, and look at the equipment full of industrial power. This is almost all the credit of Williams and Adrian. This kind of scene, in this era, even those powers in Europe can't see it. Even Shi Xiong can be proud to say that in terms of this industrial base, it is at least a century ahead of the European powers. In fact, in this era, invention and creation are very easy things. The development of mankind to the present, after thousands of years of farming, has accumulated, and the Industrial Revolution will naturally start. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, an idea may make you a true scientist. This is the same as the Internet era in later generations. Later generations of Internet tycoons, didn't they all rely on an idea to succeed in the initial stage? The same is true in this era when the Industrial Revolution is just emerging. It's just the age of steel, and the age of the Internet is the age of code. After a big turn, Shi Xiong was really satisfied. The scale of the Norfolk shipyard is far from comparable to the Shangjing industrial base, and even the Dikingshan industrial base is more than 10 times larger than here. But here, it is an industrial base with the highest technological content of the entire Yanhuang tribe. Here, water power has become only auxiliary power. The main source of power here is steam engines of different sizes. Even under the guidance of Shi Xiong, the steel-making open hearth furnace built by Williams and Adrian was powered by a steam engine. Although the steam engine is currently the most advanced power source, Shi Xiong is still not satisfied. Shi Xiong intends to take advantage of the period of the War of Independence and begin to develop the internal combustion engine. And now the Yanhuang tribe, which has already laid down the Great Lakes region, has included the area that first produced oil in North America. Bill Gates, who is proficient in chemical experiments, is now preparing to carry out purification experiments on the black crude oil produced by the famous petroleum creek. In the original historical time and space, This oil stream in northeastern Pennsylvania was the site of the first oil well in the United States. At the intersection of the Oil Creek and the Allegheny River, an oil city appeared. If there is no Stone Bear, this is the territory of the Seneca people, one of the 6 tribes of the Iroquois League. Now that the Stone Bear has even defeated the entire Iroquois alliance, it has naturally become a territory controlled by the Stone Bear. If you want to develop an internal combustion engine, petroleum is indispensable. Therefore, Shi Xiong has sent a scientific research team headed by Brother Gay to search for an artesian oil field in Ixi. It has not been affected by the War of Independence, and the scientific research team headed by Brother Lee is guarded by a regiment of grizzly soldiers, which is enough to protect their safety. Of course, the internal combustion engine is still early, and the power source used now is mainly steam engine, supplemented by hydraulic power. The proportion of steam engines used in Norfolk Shipyard is much higher than that of Shangjing Industrial Base and Dikingshan Industrial Base. I can have such a situation here. Shi Xiong is really satisfied. But the Adrian Carlos next to him is worried. He suffocated his stomach and wanted to ask Lord Chief. It seemed that he felt Carlos' emotions. On the way to the dry dock, Stone Bear took the initiative to talk to Carlos. "Aide, what useful experience did you get in the process of building that iron ship? How many things did you sum up about this steel battleship?" "Master Chief, the design and construction process of this ship has benefited me a lot," Carlos said excitedly, "but Master Chief, this ship is always an experimental ship. I am still not sure about the ship's quality, specific performance indicators. Everything has to wait until the water and the test after I have a bottom." Shi Xiong said with a smile, "Aide, this kind of thing is not anxious. However, we finally built such a ship anyway. The design and construction process of this ship will definitely let our scientific researchers getting a lot of inspiration, will also allow our shipbuilders to be well trained." "Yes, Lord Chief, this ship has taught us a lot of things," Carlos said sincerely, "but Lord Chief, I have a lot of questions to ask you. How do you know so many things?" "Knowing that at the beginning, I didn't know the things you pointed to us, but the facts later proved that the things you pointed were really too correct, so I really want to ask you, how are you?" Carlos didn't finish his words www.wuxiaspot.com and was interrupted by the bones on the side. "Adrian, don't you still understand how our chieftain's title of Son of God came from? The chief of the empire was really personally directed by the Supreme Sun God. It is precisely because of the personal guidance of the Sun that our chief will know everything." Although Carlos does not believe in the Sun God, he is an out-and-out Catholic. He believes in God in Christ, so he believes that there are gods in this world. Of course he knows what the title of his chieftain, the Son of God, means. Seeing Carlos's speechless expression, Shi Xiong smiled slightly. "How do I know those things? I don't think this is the point. As an excellent ship designer and builder, I think the focus of attention should be what you learned during the design and construction of this ship, and then use what you learned to design and build a better and faster warship instead of always paying attention to me. You say what about, at Ishika's words made Carlos a little embarrassed. He smirked and nodded. Shi Xiong patted his shoulder. "Aide, you are a very talented ship designer and engineer. I believe that with the design and construction experience of this ship, you will definitely design and build in the future to produce a more powerful steel battleship." While talking, the group of them came to the dry dock. After they personally opened the door to the dry dock, a dark warship shining with a unique light of steel appeared in everyone's eyes. Chapter 590, Steel Battleship. Viewed from the side, the steel battleship, which was somewhat square, was sitting on the keel and side piers of this huge dry dock at this time. There is no water in the dry dock at this time, and some workers are still busy below, seeming to be doing the final inspection of the steel battleship. The dry dock is very big. At least when Shi Xiong saw this dry dock for the first time, the thought that came to his mind was what a big pit. In fact, in the past and present life, although Shi Xiong has seen many ships, even super freighters and oil tankers above 100,000 tons, he has never seen a real shipyard with his own eyes. In his previous life, he just heard from the computer about this kind of place specially used for shipbuilding or ship maintenance. It's just that whether it's the pictures of dry docks seen on the computer network or the pictures of dry docks seen in some military magazines, it's hard to catch up with the shock of seeing a dry dock with my own eyes. Even if this dry dock is actually not very big, it is still a supergiant pit with a length of more than 80 meters, a width of more than 12 meters, and a depth of 7 meters. Yes, this dry dock is actually a big pit, a square pit. Arrived here, even if he arrived at the site of Adrian Carlos, he said with a slight excitement on his face at this time, "Respected Chief, this dry dock is built by more than 300 people in more than 3 months. Good dry dock. However, at the beginning, this dry dock often sees water or even leaks. We lay the keel while checking for missing leaks." It was not until half a year later that the dock was completely completed. Shi Xiong nodded in satisfaction. In Europe, there were docks as early as the end of the 15th century. After nearly 300 years of development, docks have long been popular in European countries. As a ship designer and construction engineer in the Kingdom of Spain, Adrian Carlos naturally knows how to build docks. However, after all, this dock is dedicated to the construction of steel battleships, and it is naturally different from the dock used to build sail battleships. No matter how well the dock is repaired, the battleship that sits quietly on the keel and side piers is more attractive when it is not. Judging from the classification standards of warships in later generations, this ship is a typical flat-deck destroyer. 4 thick black chimneys are located in the center of the hull, and cannons can be seen on the front and rear decks. From the side, the whole ship is square, without bulbous bow, and without the smoothness of the modern warships of later generations. However, in this age, it is really not easy to be able to build such a steel battleship. This is an ironclad ship that uses steam to power it. If it were in the original historical time and space, it would take 30 full years for the first ship to be powered by steam to appear, and the Clermont that was on trial on the Hudson River was nothing more than a wooden boat. And the world's first ironclad ship powered by steam will not be born in France for nearly a century. However, the Glory is not a full iron armored ship in the true sense, but simply nailed the armor to the outside of the wooden hull. No matter from which aspect, as long as the steel warship in front of us can be launched and the sea trial is successful, this warship will be close to a century ahead of Europe's most powerful naval power. Master Chief, the idea and design of this ship is really a genius idea. How did you think of using steel as a hull? God is here. If it were not for your guidance, I would never have thought of building a ship in my life. Steel is used as the hull and steam engine is used as the power of the warship. Carlos looked very excited, but at the same time he was a little nervous. I just don't know whether this ship can float as designed and can really sail on the water after launching. This steel battleship can be said to have been built by him alone, and all his hard work is condensed in it. The most important thing is that the design concept of this ship has surpassed this era for more than a century, and the impact on Carlos is naturally extremely huge. And when this steel battleship with a displacement of less than 1,000 tons was really built successfully, the excitement in his heart could no longer be suppressed. Shi Xiong can understand this feeling. He patted Carlos on the shoulder and said softly, "Aide, I think this ship will definitely meet the design requirements." Shi Xiong naturally would not tell him that almost all military warships in later generations are made of steel. Carlos clenched his fist tightly, as if to cheer himself up. Shi Xiong said with a smile, "Aide, now let's talk about some data of this ship. Although I have also participated in the design of this ship, I am not sure about some specific parameters." Mentioning this, Carlos was in a good mood immediately, and he immediately said like a few treasures, "Master Chief, when this ship was being built, I slightly modified the data. I think the previous length of 90 meters is too long, and 9.5 meters, the width is too narrow, so after strict calculations, I reduced the length of the ship by 8 meters and increased the width by 1.5 meters. In this way, if the ship can really sail on the ocean, it will be seaworthy. Sex will be better." Shi Xiong nodded. but said nothing. Carlos continued, in other words, the final length of the ship is 82 meters. www.wuxiaspot.com width is 11 meters, and the height from deck to bottom is 8.4 meters. According to the design, the hull of this ship is made of approximately 20 millimeters. Steel plates are constructed using riveting technology, and a total of about 400 tons of steel plates are used. If it can be floated successfully, the design draft is about 3.8 meters, and the full load displacement should be able to reach 2,000 tons. In terms of power, we have installed 4 steam boilers with the highest power that we can produce for this ship, and every 2 boilers corresponds to 1 turbine. As for the efficiency, to be honest, I don't have any idea in my heart. After all, I have never designed a ship powered by a steam engine. Well, but I think the power of this ship should be excellent. As for weapons, we have 2 single-barreled 105mm guns on the bow and stern. These are our 4 main guns. There are 6 76mm guns as secondary guns, in addition to 16 76mm guns. Mortars are used as auxiliary firepower. Although the number of artillery on this ship is very small, our artillery is very powerful, and our artillery has an effective range and accuracy far beyond the current British, French artillery, so we should have an absolute advantage in weapons. As for other parameters, it is still unclear. That can only be determined after launching a sea trial. These data sounds good, but Shi Xiong knows that these data are only design data that stays on paper. As for how this ship is, it really is as Carlos said, everything has to wait until after launching to know. Chapter 591, Carlos, Master Chief, according to the rules, you should name this ship. Carlos, who had introduced the ship, said seriously. Name? Shi Xiong was taken aback for a moment, and then realized that although this ship is only an experimental ship, it is definitely an epic-making steel battleship, and it seems that only he has the qualification to name it. However, this is only an experimental ship after all, not a regular warship, so Shi Xiong does not intend to name it after a clan or clan celebrity. But after he saw Adrian Carlos next to him, he smiled and said, Aid, you have also made a great contribution to this ship, so if you think it is possible, I would like to use your last name. That is, Carlos named the ship. What do you think? As soon as he uttered these words, Carlos's face suddenly became flushed, and the faces of all the people around him showed envy. This is an out-and-out great honor. Naming a ship with a person's last name is definitely the highest reward for that person. Carlos naturally knew what it meant, so he almost fainted with excitement. After a long time, Carlos gradually recovered from his excitement. After a series of thank you in his mouth, he waited for the ship's formal entry into the water with an uncontrollable smile. Under the order of Shi Xiong, all the tribesmen who were busy at the bottom of the dock climbed up. Carlos shouted several times. After confirming that there was no one in the dock, he ordered the opening of the dock door of the dry dock. As the dock door was lifted up a little bit, the water of the Elizabeth River began to pour in continuously, but it will take a while to fill this dock completely. Almost everyone is watching the ship nervously. With more and more river water poured in, the ship really slowly floated up. The cheers rang out in this almost sealed dry dock. This is not a wooden boat, it can float by virtue of the buoyancy of the wood itself. This is an out-and-out steel ship. Shi Xiong did not cheer, but there was also a smile on his face. Stone Bear has never doubted whether this Carlos can float. This is a ship built using hot riveting technology. There is no welding technology in this era, only this riveting technology can be used to rivet the hull. Before World War I, all steel battleship hulls were riveted using this riveting technique. Of course, this technology is currently the only Scorpion ship. For this technology, Carlos and the others have spent a lot of hard work doing various experiments before finally determining how to riveting. It took more than half a year to finalize this technology, even if Shi Xiong was pointing in the general direction just to study this hot riveting technology. Perhaps this hot riveting technique has loopholes of this kind, but it doesn't matter. With the launch of the Carlos, whether this technology will work or not will be known by conducting a sea trial. As for this ship, the Stone Bear was actually designed based on the Caldwell-class destroyer built by the American Navy at the end of World War I. It's also a coincidence that, before going to study in the United States, one of his friends had just made a model of a Caldwell-class destroyer by hand. His friend is a crazy military fan, especially obsessed with the warships of various countries during the First World War. There are no less than 20 types of ship models in this guy's home, all of which were warships built by various countries during the First World War. From battleships to destroyers, they are all made by him. At that time, Shi Xiong was drinking at that friend's house, and his friend took out the model of the Caldwell-class destroyer that he had just made by himself, and told Shi Xiong in great detail about the ship. Specification. So, when Shi Xiong was about to build an iron-armored ship, he first thought of the ship model. In fact, with the current technology of the Yanhuang tribe, it is absolutely impossible to build such a steel battleship out of thin air, but it couldn't stand the existence of Stone Bear, the biggest bug. Therefore, under the continuous guidance of Stone Bear and the crazy efforts of Carlos and the others, it took more than 6 years for this ship to finally take shape. If you count the preliminary preparations, then just to build this ship, the Yanhuang tribe took 8 years. If in later generations, a 1,000-ton destroyer like this antique model can be launched in less than a year, but in this era, it took a full 6 years. But anyway, this steel battleship that has gathered countless efforts and energy finally floated successfully. As long as it can float, that is a huge improvement. Carlos accompanied Stone Bear on the deck of Carlos through the springboard. Stone Bear and Hardbone stood at the forefront of the deck and looked at the wide Elizabeth River outside the dock with emotion. As for Carlos and others, they started to get busy. Now the ship cannot be out of the dock. After all, whether the hot riveting will work or not, whether the hull will enter water, it needs to be tested. Only when it is confirmed that the hull will not enter the water in such almost static waters, then the ship will leave the dock and enter the Elizabeth River to continue testing. Once the hull can withstand the impact of the Elizabeth River, it will finally enter the Atlantic Ocean to the east for sea trials. Boss, can such a ship really withstand the sailing battleships of Vasiku? Hardbone, as the commander of the Navy force, still does not believe that such a slender and long iron ship can be those verticals and horizontals. Sailing battleship in the Atlantic Ocean. Shi Xiong stroked the 105mm main gun located at the bow of the ship, shook his head slightly and said, "It's still unclear how fast the ship is. If the ship can exceed 10 knots, then the ship will deal with those sails. The battleship is stress-free." Seeing that there was still a trace of disbelief on the Hardbone face, Shi Xiong explained patiently, "First of all, our firepower. Do you think the naval guns used by Vasiku that can only fire solid rounds can be compared on our 105 main gun?" Hardbone shook his head without any doubt. "Our 105 main gun can paralyze those Vasiku sailing battleships with one shot." www.wuxiaspot.com. If our 105 main gun can hit more than 3 shells on the same ship, you can sink Vasiku's ship directly. Our artillery power has an absolute advantage. Ishikama nodded, not to mention the 105mm main gun, even the 76 mortar. Those wooden boats can't stand it. Our ship is riveted with 20mm thick steel plates. The defensive power of this 20mm thick steel plate is almost equivalent to that of 700mm thick wooden boards. Now the artillery of the sail battleship of Vasiku is in the second at a distance of 100 meters, at most. It can penetrate 600mm thick wooden boards. Therefore, as long as they are not directly fired by the large pound artillery of those sailing battleships at a short distance, their shells will not penetrate our hull. But if Vasiku has a lot of sailing battleships, how about we surround our ships and fight? So, whether our ship will work or not depends on the speed of the specific sea trial. Don't forget, the reason why I wanted to build such a steel battleship was not just for the purpose of being beaten. We have to rely on excellent speed, firepower and armor, to crush those sailing battleships in all directions. so that our steel battleships can be invincible and invincible. Ishikama patted the hard-boned shoulder and said, "Hard bones, Kebai looked down on the ship. Once the experiment on this ship is successful, then all the oceans on this planet in the future will become our bathhouse." Although the bones nodded, he still seemed to not understand the last words that Shi Xiong said. Chapter 592, Surprise. Hard Bones naturally doesn't understand what the dark steel battleship in front of him means, and Shi Xiong will not explain to him now. Anyway, when Hard Bones sees the power of this steel battleship with his own eyes, he will understand. And now Shi Xiong doesn't have the time and mood to explain this aspect of things. His attention is all attracted by the ship. Throughout the morning, Shi Xiong did not leave the dock filled with water. Carlos stayed in the dock for the whole morning to test whether the hull would enter or seep water. After all, this is the first steel ship in the world to be riveted by hot riveting technology. No one knows whether this riveting technology has passed the test. After a morning of static testing, the results look good. The 24 watertight tanks below the deck of Carlos below the waterline did not show water ingress or seepage. This result made everyone including Shi Xiong let out a long sigh. What is the most important thing about a ship? It's simple, it doesn't leak. If a ship leaks everywhere, not even an aircraft carrier. Obviously, this latest hot riveting technology is qualified, and the workers at the Norfolk shipyard are also qualified. Since the static test is very effective, the next step is to enter the Elizabeth River for sailing test. Thick black smoke billowed from the 4 large chimneys of the Carlos, and within a few minutes, the ventilated shipyard was completely smoky. At this time, Shi Xiong felt that the internal combustion engine, which he despised in his previous life, was so good and so environmentally friendly. Compared to this coal-burning steam engine, the oil-burning internal combustion engine is simply an environmental expert. It would take at least 20 minutes from the time the furnace was turned on to the water temperature in the boiler to reach the required steam, and at this time there was no way for people to stay in the dock. Therefore, taking advantage of this time, Shi Xiong and the others ate a quick meal, have lunch, then enter the dock again and board the Carlos, waiting for the Carlos to leave the dock. Ishikama and they just boarded the Carlos and entered the bridge shortly afterwards, accompanied by the loud noise produced by the clear steam engine working. The Carlos slowly moved out of the dock. As soon as the hull was out of the dock, the thick smoke from the 4 chimneys was blown away by the wind. Sure enough, the best place for this thing to ride is in the sea, and only the boundless space of the sea and strong wind can blow away the dense smoke. The boat is driven by a few people under the hard bones. These people are all fighters of the Gaoshu tribe, and they are the first group to drive the inland river armed transport ship. They have been following the shipyard since the time the Carlos was built. They communicated with Adrian Carlos and other shipbuilding engineers every day, and then slowly explored how to navigate the ship. After all, the driving style of this steel battleship is different from the driving style of sailing ships. How is the power? Carlos nervously grabbed the magnet phone and talked to the crew in the engine room below. The boiler operating load is 30%, and the operation is stable and good. The clear voice of the engine room crew came from the hand-cranked magnet phone, and Shi Xiong could hear it standing aside. Slowly increase the operating power to 50%. Carlos gave the order in a deep voice. In today's test, he is the captain of this ship, and even Stone Bear and Hard Bones can only be spectators. As the noise and vibration increased again, Shi Xiong felt that the Carlos, which had adjusted its direction, began to accelerate slowly. Although the speed is not fast, this is undoubtedly a very good result. This is a steel battleship, and it is also a warship that uses propellers. It can make this ship float and not sink, until the ship can move and slowly accelerate. This is a huge breakthrough. Although the ship was designed by Stone Bear based on the Caldwell-class destroyers of the United States during World War I, this ship is far from being compared with the real Caldwell-class destroyers. Although the appearance is very similar, the inner things are still far away. For example, the real destroyer Caldwell in the previous life was a twin-shaft twin-propeller propulsion, and its core power was 4 Schultz Thundercraft coal-fired boilers. Schultz-Sonnecroft-type coal-fired boilers, equipped with 2A Parsons steam turbine. Parsons steam turbine is used as the core power. This configuration can provide the destroyer Caldwell with a single shaft of up to 10,000 horsepower. The boiler of the Carlos is a steam boiler made by the Yanhuang tribe, although the efficiency of this new type of boiler, which is far more efficient than any current steam boiler in Europe, under the guidance of Shi Xiong, the efficiency is good, but it is far from being able to compete with the First World War compared with the steam boiler of the period. And there is no steam turbine on the Carlos. This ship uses the most primitive mechanical conversion method that uses a steam engine to convert it into mechanical power. Well, it's similar to the working principle of the locomotive. The efficiency of the steam engine is far inferior to that of the Caldwell, and the efficiency of the conversion of steam engine power into mechanical power is also far less than that of the Caldwell. So the Carlos can only be regarded as an ironclad ship that looks like the Caldwell. The previous Caldwell-class destroyer was equipped with 4 triple-mounted 533mm torpedo launchers, 2 40mm ping-pong guns and 2 7.6mm anti-aircraft machine guns. www.wuxiaspot.com. But Carlos did not need to be released. Torpedoes do not need air defense. So Carlos does not have torpedo launchers, ping-pong cannons and air defense machine guns. The torpedo launchers and ping-pong guns and other anti-aircraft weapons were replaced with 76mm guns and 76mm mortars. In terms of firepower, the Carlos is not inferior to the real Caldwell-class destroyer. But the motivation is not good. Everything is in vain. Caldwell-class destroyers can reach speeds of up to 32 knots, but what about the Carlos? Anyway, Shi Xiong doesn't know, no one knows, everything can only be known after the sea trial is over. But Stone Bear doesn't have much confidence in Carlos. After all, the core power is too bad. But many things in this world are sometimes so interesting. It's like Ishikama didn't have much confidence in the speed of Carlos at the beginning. Anyway, it was just an experimental ship. The experience accumulated in the process of building this ship is the most important. Unexpectedly, this steel battleship that was launched for the first time quickly gave Shi Xiong a huge surprise. The weather today is not very good, the wind is a bit strong, the waves in the Elizabeth River, which is more than 1 kilometer wide, are more than half a meter high. But in this half-meter high wave, as the black smoke from the 4 chimneys of the Carlos became denser and denser, the ship seemed to be transformed into a dolphin that escaped the clutches of the orca, even running faster and faster on the wide river. Chapter 593, Seepage. Carlos, who has been nervously paying attention to the situation in the engine room, apparently also noticed this situation. Now he didn't even pay attention to the engine room, put down the magnet phone in his hand and pulled the Stone Bear open the cockpit door and walked outside. The oncoming wind is still very strong. Carlos sailed from south to north. Today, the wind was blowing from the north again. Coupled with the increasing speed of Carlos, the wind felt by standing outside the bridge was naturally very strong. The speed is almost 10 knots. Carlos is an experienced ship designer and shipbuilder, and he can naturally judge the speed of a ship in general. Shi Xiong drove a car, ridden a motorcycle, and ridden a battery car in his previous life. He also had a good sense of speed. He smiled and nodded and said, "Yes, I think the Carlos is almost 10 knots now." Ishikama's approval made Carlos jump on the spot with excitement several times. Obviously, the speed of this ship definitely exceeded his expectations. 1 knot is about 1.85 kilometers, and the speed of 10 knots is about 18.5 kilometers per hour. This speed is definitely the top sailing speed in this era. You must know that the sail battleships currently used by European powers are basically in the category of Galen ships. This kind of wooden hull ship, which relies on sails for power, sails in the sea at a speed of only 7 to 10 knots. How many sails are there on a sailing battleship? And where is this ship at your feet? Not only does it have no sails, but it is also a steel battleship. This ship, made of steel that is impossible to float in the water, can run so fast under the impetus of a steam engine. This is simply subverting Carlos's understanding. Aid! Shi Xiong yelled, and stopped Carlos, who was jumping in excitement. Ask about the engine room boiler and gearbox, and see if you can increase the power. Carlos nodded excitedly, opened the steel door of the bridge and ran in, grabbed the phone and started to inquire. Ishikama slowly walked in. After a while, Carlos said excitedly, "Chief, the operating power of the boiler has been maintained at about 75% just now, and it is in good condition. I have asked them to continue to increase the power to the top. See how fast our ship can run." Shi Xiong touched the stubble on his chin and nodded in satisfaction. 75% of the power can make this ship run at a speed of 10 knots, which is too unexpected. Through the glass windows of the bridge, Shi Xiong can clearly see that the black smoke emerging from the 4 thick chimneys behind him has become denser. Under the blowing of the north wind, the 4 black smoke columns have formed a black surface on the river surface. Smoke belt. On the far bank of the river, many tribesmen stood on the shore watching, and a large number of tribesmen were kneeling and praying. Obviously, these tribesmen were frightened by this black smoky steel battleship. Shi Xiong has no time to take care of the feelings of these people. The most important thing before him is to test the general performance of the ship. It's just a pity that when Shi Xiong just felt that the ship's speed began to increase, the location of the estuary was faintly seen ahead. Ishikama only hesitated for a while, and then gave the order to slow down. This ship cannot be exposed to outsiders, let alone those Europeans. Is the estuary of the Elizabeth River in front of you, and you will enter the James River when you exit the estuary. And the James River is an important inland waterway for the British in the 13th colony. After all, ships from the British mainland or from colonial cities such as New York and Philadelphia to Jamestown and Williamsburg must pass through the James River. Carlos naturally understood the meaning of the stone bear, so the Carlos began to slow down while preparing to turn around. Here, the width of the Elizabeth River has exceeded 2 kilometers, and the Carlos can turn around here freely. After the ship turned its bow, Carlos ordered to move forward at full speed. Because the boiler had to be tested before, the speed of Carlos was very slow. This time it was going straight ahead at full speed, so in just a few minutes, Carlos' speed increased. After more than 10 kilometers of acceleration, the engine room below reported that the boiler power had been increased to the extreme. Although it is impossible to test how much horsepower these 4 boilers can provide for the Carlos, it is clear that the power of these 4 boilers should be greater than imagined. Carlos is also propelled by twin-shaft wind propellers. According to the current top speed of about 13 to 14 knots, these 4 boilers can provide about 2,000 to 3,000 horsepower for each propeller. This is obviously a very good number. Don't forget, there is no steam turbine in the engine room of the Carlos. The power conversion capacity of the steam boiler is much worse. It is obviously very good to be able to do this. And a maximum speed of 13 or 14 knots is enough. If it can run at this speed in sea trials, then Carlos will have the absolute upper hand in the face of any European power's first-class sailing battleship. Even if it is against a fleet, flying a kite can drag the fleet down only by the speed of the Carlos. www.wuxiaspa.com. Don't forget, the Carlos is made of 10 mm thick steel plate. The hull. This kind of steel hull naturally has no defense against future artillery, but at present, unless a heavy artillery over a 32-pound gun is fired directly within a distance of 200 meters, it can damage the hull of the Carlos. Other smaller artillery is basically not a threat to Carlos. If Carlos runs slowly, not as fast as those sailing battleships, then Carlos may be in danger. But once the Carlos can maintain a speed of more than 10 knots, then relying on the main gun and 76 mm secondary guns equipped by the Carlos, it will definitely be able to drag a fleet down by flying a kite. Carlos's main and secondary guns have an effective range of more than 8 kilometers. Even the 76 mm mortar has an effective range of more than 5 kilometers. As long as the Carlos can maintain a sufficient distance from the sailing battleship, there will only be one result, and that is the Carlos hanging the sailing battleship. The key to this is the speed of the Carlos. But obviously, the speed of the Carlos has exceeded Stone Bear's best expectations. Shi Xiong is imagining that one day in the future, his steel battleship will meet the sailing battleship fleet of European powers, and then various fancy hoisting sailing battleships. The engine room below is not very good. News. Captain, there seems to be something wrong with our propeller, and water is starting to seep there. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 594, Exhausted. The news made all the faces in Cambridge sink. Especially Shi Xiong. Suddenly there was some irritability in his heart. Others, including Adrian Carlos, may only know how much manpower and material resources were used to build this ship, but they absolutely don't know what the entire Yanhuang tribe paid for behind this ship. Only Shi Xiong himself knew how much the tribe had paid to build this ship, and what the tribe paid is far beyond what the ship underfoot can reflect. Before the First World War, in the original historical time and space, there is a saying that makes sense: whether a country is strong or not depends on the power of the battleships that the country has. The meaning of is obvious, but it also illustrates a problem from another aspect, that is, the level of battleships owned by a country is a manifestation of a country's comprehensive capabilities. This also includes the country's scientific research and manufacturing capabilities. The facts are also true. Before World War I, and even during the period from World War I to World War II, battleships were the top weapons in a country, not one of them. Of course, in this era, you can also think of sailing battleships as battleships. But compared to the sail battleship, Carlos's technology applications are undoubtedly higher, and the two are definitely not on the same level. In order to build the Carlos, Shi Xiong tried his best to solve the numbers. He told almost everything he knew, and he took out almost everything he could develop and manufacture. There are many technologies that were originally difficult to achieve in this era, such as hot riveting technology for ship hulls, such as forging technology of marine steel plates, such as propeller processing technology, such as high-power steam boiler technology, such as in-ship telephone communication technology. No one knows better than Stone Bear how much the entire tribe has done in the 8 years to build this ship. Is like the steel plate used to build this ship. If Shi Xiong had just passed through it, it would have been impossible to produce. Later, after Shi Xiong became the chief, he had tremendous power in his hand, and he began to work hard for forging qualified marine steel plates. Of course, this so-called marine steel plate is definitely far from being compared with later marine steel plates. The so-called marine steel plate in this era is not even better than the steel plate used by a fishing boat in later generations. But there is no way, in this era, let alone steel plates. Even the steel bars are currently only produced by the Yanhuang tribe. In Europe, they can't even produce a roll of qualified steel bars, let alone for building ships. Steel plate. But even so, Shi Xiong can't come up with any hot rolling and cold rolling technologies for later generations. That kind of technology is still too difficult for the current Yanhuang tribe, and the tribe does not have the ability to build a hot rolling mill or a cold rolling mill. So Ashikama had no choice but to retreat, and use the forging method to produce the so-called marine steel plate. But even the forging technology has caused Shi Xiong a headache. Without him, if you want to forge a qualified steel plate, you have to have the most basic forging machine, right? And even the simplest forging machine, Shi Xiong couldn't make it now. There is a way to get it out of the steam hammer, but that thing cannot forge steel plates. There is no way. Shi Xiong can only use the most primitive hydraulic press for forging. The working principle of the hydraulic press is very simple. The previous Shi Xiong learned it when he was in junior high school physics, and in the original historical time and space, the world's first hydraulic press will appear in the UK in more than 2 decades. The hydraulic press is not that difficult, something fiddled with. But even so, in order to build a hydraulic press capable of forging, The entire tribe took a full 10 months. Under the constant guidance of Shi Xiong, as many as 40 people from Europe, including Jack Williams, have been busy with this hydraulic press for 10 months. The hydraulic press that finally came out was only a 1,000-ton hydraulic press. Such a hydraulic press can barely be used for forging steel plates with a thickness of 20 mm. The thickness of the marine steel plates used in the hulls of later destroyers is only about 10 mm, but the current steel is far from comparable to later generations, so Shi Xiong can only use the method of thick steel plate to enhance the strength of the hull. In addition, the current marine steel plates do not have a great demand for area. They are all riveting techniques. It is a big deal to put them together one by one. There are marine steel plates and the most important keel steel. When keel steel and marine steel plates are available, this ship can be built, but the question is, you can't just use these steel to build a ship hull, right? You have to have enough motivation to propel this ship, right? So the high-power steam boiler technology had another breakthrough. With the technology of high-power steam engine, you have to find a way to turn the power generated by the steam engine into thrust, right? So gearbox technology and propeller technology must be available. Shi Xiong doesn't want to use paddle wheels to propel this steel battleship. It is too low, and the safety is not high. If he can't get propeller propulsion technology, Shi Xiong would rather not build this steel warship. So Ishikama took out the Archimedes spiral of the forged propeller again. It took nearly 2 years for the scientific research team to develop a barely qualified propeller. The ship's hull, power, propulsion, and weapons are ready, but what about internal communications? So Shi Xiong had to instruct the scientific research team to engage in magnet telephones and wires for communication. The outer insulation layer of the wires alone kept the scientific research team busy for dozens of days. And when the conditions for building this ship were all met, and when the steel battleship was built on a slipway, many problems emerged one after another. The sealing problem of the watertight tank. The sealing and drainage problem after the wave on the deck. www.wuxiaspot.com. The sealing problem of the watertight door. etc. I don't know if I don't build it. I know that the main problems encountered before are just an appetizer. When the ship started to be built, all kinds of problems were really unconscious. For example, in the later stage of construction, the sealing problem of the propeller shaft became a problem again. Although Ishikama knows how to seal the propeller shaft, it is impossible to create such a sealed bearing in this age. So a group of people pondered for a long time before choosing a compromise method, using rubber and vegetable oil to lubricate the seal. This approach is not a long-term solution. If the propeller shaft runs for a long time, the natural rubber used for sealing will inevitably produce huge wear and tear, and the sealing effect will naturally be greatly reduced. But there is no other way. Under the current circumstances, this method can only be temporarily sealed. All in all, the difficulties encountered by this ship before and during its construction are countless. Otherwise, it would take a full 6 years for the ship to be built. In order to solve these problems and sufferings, in order to successfully build this ship, everyone, including Stone Bear, is absolutely scrambling and exhausting. It's not an exaggeration to say that the energy the Stone Bear used to conquer other tribes on this continent could not compare to the energy used on this ship. Having paid such a big price, the ship has been successfully launched into the water. This was originally a very happy thing, but now suddenly there is a problem of water leakage from the propeller shaft. How can this not make Shi Xiong feel anxious? Chapter 595 Metamorphosis. The anxious Stone Bear led a group of people out of the engine room. At the back of the engine room, they saw the propeller shaft that was leaking water into it. Coriolis is propelled by twin shafts and twin propellers. 2 steam boilers correspond to 1 propeller shaft. It is the number 1 propeller shaft that seeps water in, and the number 2 propeller shaft has no water seepage. The situation is normal. However, the water seepage of the number 1 propeller shaft is not serious, which somewhat relieved Shi Xiong. In fact, this situation is a normal situation. After all, this is a new ship, And it is also the world's first steel battleship. The technologies used are technologies that have never been before, and problems are normal. It's not normal if something goes wrong. It's just that Ishikama paid too much on this ship, so he felt anxious after hearing the problem just now. Seeing that this situation is not serious now, Shi Xiong's mentality quickly recovered. Aid, stop the test for now. First dock the ship to the dock of the shipyard. Let's discuss how to solve the problem of propeller shaft seepage, and then start the test. Shi Xiong quickly made a decision. Adrian Carlos nodded and said, Master Chief, I think so too. Actually, I can guess why this happened now. It's because we don't have better lubricants. Shi Xiong nodded. Why didn't he know the problem? To say that other mechanical equipment can be used to point the R&D team with gold fingers to make R&D. But the lubricant is not something that can be made out of it. Even if it is the most primitive mineral oil motor oil, it must first be made out of petroleum. The fractional distillation equipment is available. As for calcium-based lubricating grease, which is also known as butter, it is more difficult to deal with than mineral oil motor oil. Well, let's use the current method for the time being. I am arranging people to develop better lubricants. But this is not an emergency. I need you to see how we can make our propeller shafts longer on the existing basis. Time does not leak. Ishikama has nothing to do. Although he knows a little bit about the principles and knowledge of petroleum fractionation, he only knows roughly. Everything needs to be done various experiments, which takes time. But fortunately, it is only now in 776. And there are still several years before the Stone Bear project will work on Europeans and Americans. Taking advantage of this period of time, it is the right thing to work out what should be done. Now Bill Gates has taken his team to northeast Pennsylvania to search for oil. Oil is not hard to find. Xi is not for nothing, but there, the oil comes out by itself. Find oil and conduct various experiments. Sooner or later, you can get diesel, gasoline, motor oil, kerosene and so on. Although I encountered such a small unpleasantness in the final stage of the test, in general today's test is still very good. The happiest thing is undoubtedly the speed of this ship. It should be understood that although the Carlos was designed based on the Caldwell-class destroyer, because of the use of thicker marine steel plates, even if the size of the Carlos is similar to the Caldwell-class destroyer, its displacement is better than that of the previous model. The Dwyer-class destroyers are nearly double the size. No way, the weight of the steel plate used by Carlos is much heavier than the Caldwell-class destroyer. Coupled with the weight of a keel, deck, bridge, artillery, etc., it is inevitable that the Carlos's displacement exceeds the Caldwell-class destroyer. But even with so much overweight, the Carlos could still run at a speed of 13 or 4 knots. Which is definitely a big surprise. Although the Carlos's speed will decrease due to the waves in the open sea, it is estimated that if the ship moves at full speed in the open sea, it is estimated to be able to run at a speed of 12 knots. With this speed, Carlos is not afraid of any sailing battleship in the world. This is the result of the first launch test, which is beyond Shi Xiong's expectation. Carlos is an experimental ship, and similar tests need to be carried out at least several times or even dozens of tests before sea trials can be carried out. Once the sea trial is successful, the Carlos-class ironclad ship will be completely finalized. Still the same sentence, it takes time. This is an inevitable process. Any new theory is introduced, any new thing is invented. In fact, it is a process of continuous accumulation. Carlos is a platform that continues to accumulate. It's not terrible to have a problem, the terrible thing is that you don't know how to solve the problem or can't think of a solution. Once all the problems on the Carlos are resolved, then this accumulation process will eventually evolve into a final explosion, accumulation. In the original historical time and space, the evolution process from sailing battleship to ironclad ship took hundreds of years. Therefore, Shi Xiong is not anxious now. Test slowly, find the problem slowly, and solve the problem slowly. Many things are not enough to be impatient. Once a truly qualified Carlos-class ironclad ship is launched into the sea and can fight www.wuxiaspad.com, then the experience accumulated in the process of building this level of ironclad ship will become extremely precious. The experience accumulated during the construction of this level of ironclad ships can be reversed to drive the improvement of the entire industrial level of the tribe. From materials to machinery, from power to communications, and other aspects, there will be a great improvement due to the success of the Carlos-class ironclad ships. This kind of improvement is also the improvement of the Yanhuang tribe's overall strength, the process of the Yanhuang tribes catching up with the European powers, and the process of the Yanhuang tribe's overall transformation. But Shi Xiong knows very well that this process is destined to be a very difficult process. Even with the existence of his own golden finger, this process will be extremely difficult. An ironclad ship with a displacement of no more than 2,000 tons is enough to prove how difficult this process is and how high the threshold is. But the same, as long as the Yanhuang tribe can resolutely cross this threshold, then the Yanhuang tribe is destined to stand at the pinnacle of this world. Ishikama has no doubt about this. This is why he is willing to consume so much manpower, material resources, financial resources, and energy to build the Carlos. It is the same as the reason why the grandfather of the later generation said that he would have to do 2 bombs and 1 star. This is a complete process that continues to accumulate and finally erupts to complete the transformation. Only after completing such a process can a country truly stand up. The previous life of China has completed this process with the power of the whole country in just a few decades. So Shi Xiong is also confident to lead the Yanhuang tribe to complete such a gorgeous transformation. Chapter 596, Frenchmen Looking for Fault. In this summer of 1776, the northern half of the 13 colonies in North America was furious. Because the Continental Army issued the Declaration of Independence in early July, the already very hot battlefield was directly poured with gasoline from a tanker, and the raging war suddenly increased countless times again. Stimulated by the Declaration of Independence, Major General William Howe, who had succeeded Major General Thomas Gage as the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in North America on October 10 last year, began to fight his life. He led 320,000 British troops with the cooperation of the British fleet, the Continental Army under the command of Mr. Watson, and scrambled. In the past August, the British Army led by Major General William Howe has begun to gradually approach New York. If nothing happens, the British Army will seize New York in November this year. This was the case in the early or first stage of the War of Independence. The British on the other side of the ocean firmly suppressed the American army on the battlefield. And the Continental Army is not unable to fight back. They rely on their familiarity with the terrain to deal with the powerful British in the northern battlefield. In the form of guerrilla warfare, they have some of the style of the former Chinese grandfather against the old Chiang army. But all of this has nothing to do with Shi Xiong. He just sits in the capital of Norfolk while participating in the Carlos test while arranging things on the Beijing side via radio. The War of Independence was still in full swing north of New York at this time, but it was still very calm near the James River. Although the Continental Army will harass Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown from time to time, no one dares to go to Norfolk to provoke the Cherokee. Without him, on one day in early August, both the British and the Continental Army enjoyed a free large-scale fireworks show in the distance. They were completely frightened by this free large-scale fireworks show. On the day before this day, 3 sailing battleships without any flags entered the Chesapeake Bay and then headed north along the bay. Upon arriving at Yorktown on the south bank of the mouth of the York River, shelling was launched on Yorktown, which was guarded by the British. However, these 3 sailing battleships did not achieve any good results. After all, Yorktown is now an important port city for the British in the South Central. The heavy fortress guns near Yorktown alone are enough to prevent the 3 sailing battleships shelling close to Yorktown. The 3 sailing battleships saw no results from the shelling, and ran away in the dark. Unexpectedly, the next day, these 3 sailing battleships quietly entered the James River through the Symbolshire Strait, and then went upstream along the James River and launched a bombardment on Jamestown. One of the 3 sailing battleships is a second-class sailing battleship, and 2 third-class sailing battleships. Although these 3 ships do not fly any national flags, the Stone Bear standing on a hot air balloon suspended at an altitude of 500 meters still glances through the telescope. It was obvious that these 3 sailing battleships came from that country. From the appearance of the 3 sailing battleships, the Stone Bear recognized their nationality: France. To say that the French nowadays just dig out the dung spoon and go to the head of the spoon-its Turing stick. Since the loss of New France and French Louisiana in the New World of North America in the 7 Years' War, the French have always wanted to get back their face and at the same time find a way to get back the lost colony. Unfortunately, the French had no chance for more than a decade before the outbreak of the war alone. However, the French did not do little tricks in the 13 British colonies. Many of the protests that took place in the 13 British colonies before the outbreak of the War of Independence were followed by the French. After the outbreak of the Independent War, although the French have not publicly announced that they will stand on the side of the Continental Army and join the war, they have already begun to help the Continental Army behind their backs. These 3 sailing battleships are obviously the French Navy preparing to fish in troubled waters, taking advantage of the fact that the main British forces in the north did not have time to take care of the central and southern battlefields. These 3 French sailing battleships were intended to bombard several important British seaport cities in the Chesapeake Bay, thereby restraining the main British forces from the side. It's a pity that the French people's brains really don't seem to be good enough. Didn't they think of it before they shelled Yorktown and Jamestown? Why did the Continental Army only harass the 2 seaport cities, and did not dare to attack frontally? Isn't it the defensive artillery of the 2 seaport cities? Do you really think those fortress guns that are 8-inch and 10-inch at every turn eat dry food? This kind of large-caliber mortar placed at a relatively high altitude, although the range and accuracy of shooting are very speechless, the power of this thing is really not covered. The caliber of the 8-inch mortar is equivalent to the later 203mm cannon, and 10 inches is equivalent to the 254mm cannon. Although the range and accuracy of these mortars are far from comparable to later artillery, in this era, such large-caliber fortress guns placed on fixed turrets are really scary. As long as one shot of this thing hits the target, it is enough for the sailing battleship to drink a pot. Don't forget, those guns installed on sail battleships at this time are not guns on steel battleships of later generations. The guns of this era are no different from those fortress guns in terms of effective range or accuracy. So, although the 3 sailing battleships bombarded Jamestown, they were useless, and they were still scared off by the Jamestown fortress guns. If you say that you can't beat the British, just forget it. Just run back to the Atlantic and continue cruising. You are sailing battleships, and maintaining speed and maneuverability is what you should do. As a result, Shi Xiong did not expect that he had just watched the battle between a sail battleship of this era and a fortress gun from a long distance on a hot air balloon. As a result, the 3 sail battleships turned their guns at their mouths. In Norfolk www.wuxiaspot.com, the Ghost knew if the commanders of these 3 sailing battleships had water in their heads, they could obviously return to the Atlantic Ocean, but they did not do so. Perhaps it was because the commanders of the small fleet were upset by the ineffective shelling of the British harbor, or they saw Norfolk wanting to find some face in Norfolk, so they passed by the mouth of the Elizabeth River. At that time, the 3 sailing battleships turned a turn and rushed towards Norfolk along the Elizabeth River. The commander of the coastal artillery positions established on both sides of the Elizabeth River immediately warned the 3 ships with semaphores. As a result, the 3 sailing battleships continued to move forwards regardless of whether they were asked. So after consulting Day, the commander of the coastal defense artillery position decisively issued the bombardment order on the 3 sailing battleships. The 3 sailing battleships are driving in the middle of the river. The width of the mouth of the Elizabeth River is more than 4 kilometers. They must be driving in the middle because they think that the shore defense artillery can't hit them. As a result, What the French did not expect was that the coastal defense guns built on the banks of the Elizabeth River were not the large-caliber mortars used by the British to fire solid rounds. Although the caliber of the Yan Huang tribe's coastal defense artillery is far from comparable to that of the British's large-caliber mortars, it is a 105 heavy artillery capable of firing explosive rounds. The most important thing is that these Frenchmen simply cannot imagine how high the effective range and accuracy of these 105 heavy artillery are. Chapter 597, Brigadier General Antoine. Henry Antoine is a brigadier general of the French fleet in Guadeloupe, but he is not the supreme commander of the fleet. At the end of the 7 Years' War, France was defeated. In order to preserve the sugar cane plantations and sugar factories in Guadeloupe, the King of France reluctantly ceded French Louisiana and New France in the New World of North America. In fact, even Louis XV will not cede French Louisiana and New France. The British have long coveted these two vast colonies. The French were defeated in the 7 Years' War, and the British would be stupid if they didn't want these two places. So, on the surface, it seems that the French ceded French Louisiana and New France in order to keep Guadeloupe. In fact, everyone knows that Guadeloupe is the last parav for the French. But Guadeloupe has finally been saved. At least the sugar that the nobles in France eat every day is guaranteed, right? After the 7 Years' War, the French became more honest. For the time being, they were unable to fight the increasingly powerful British, so they could only send a fleet of 3 second-tier sailing battleships, 7 third-tier sailing battleships, and several 4th-tier fast-sailing ships to Guadeloupe, come and be stationed there. The sugar cane plantations and sugar factories on Guadeloupe are something that the French must never give up. But as the Americans started tossing in the 13 British colonies, the French found an opportunity. The French understood very well that the 7 Years' War had tossed themselves very hard, and the British were equally uncomfortable. Otherwise, the British would not increase their oppression of the 13 British colonies, which would eventually lead to the outbreak of the War of Independence. Although it was only 14 years after defeating the 7 Years' War, the French could not sit still when the time had come. It's just that they still can't stand on the side of the Continental American Army in an open manner, but it's okay to provide some assistance to the Continental Army quietly. Thus, Henry Antoine got the task of leading a squadron consisting of a 2nd-tier sailing battleship and 2 3rd-tier sailing battleships from Guadeloupe northward without flying the national flag. As a pirate, bombard the British port cities at the right time to contain the British. So Henry Antoine came to the east coast of the New World. This squadron has been cruising in the Atlantic Ocean for more than 3 months, during which time they docked in Philadelphia, controlled by the Continental Army. But as the British began to attack New York south, Brigadier General Henry Antoine led the fleet, leaving Philadelphia. At the same time, as they had discussed with the Continental Army, they were going south to prepare for bombardment of British-controlled port cities such as Yorktown and Jamestown, so as to divert the attention of the British. After this squadron departed from Philadelphia, headed south along the Delaware River, and entered the Chesapeake Bay along the east coast of the Demarva Peninsula, it began bombarding Yorktown and Jamestown. But the effect of the shelling made Brigadier General Henry Antoine very disappointed. The British defensive positions built in these 2 port cities were not something they could break through with just 3 sailing battleships. And Brigadier General Henry Antoine did not want to risk losing his warship to attack these 2 ports with his life. His purpose was to contain him. However, 2 consecutive shellings failed to achieve any good results, which made Brigadier General Henry Antoine very upset. Sailing battleships are weapons used to attack. If the attack has no effect, it will definitely upset the commander. Ran here for thousands of miles, but after a few rounds of gunfire, not even a dog was killed. It would be uncomfortable for anyone to replace it. Especially when the shelling of Jamestown failed to return. Henry Antoine heard his first officer say that there was a large Cherokee tribe just a little bit inside the mouth of the Elizabeth River, and this large tribe was on the bank of the river. Aside. This news made Antoine interested in the future. You must know that during the 7 Years' War, Antoine was stationed in New France for a period of time. After the defeat, although France ceded New France to the British, Antoine did not leave New France immediately. So, Antoine, who was still a colonel at the time, had heard of what happened on the Mississippi River. As the Viscount Major General Clare, the Akron military fortress on the Ohio River was beaten down by the Cherokee tribe, and by the way, the channel of the Mississippi River was cut off, which made the Major General Clare very angry. But because of the defeat, the French military strength in the New World has been greatly reduced as before, so even if the strength of the local colonists is added, there is no way to take this Cherokee tribe. It can be said that the French suffered a big loss for this indigenous Indian tribe. Although this incident has nothing to do with Antoine, he is both a French and a high-ranking French officer. He now knows that the Cherokee tribe that once caused France a big loss actually has a large tribe in it. Near here, Antoine immediately decided to prepare to avenge Viscount Clare, who had been promoted to lieutenant general. In Antoine's view, it was just an indigenous tribe. Your own fleet can't use the British fortress cannons. Isn't it possible that an indigenous tribe can't be dealt with? 3 sailing battleships approached and a few rounds of volleys were enough to flatten the tribe. Antoine has no doubts about this. These 3 sailing battleships have a total of 80 32-pounder guns, 30 18-pounder guns, and 8 I-2 12-pounder guns. Even if only half of the artillery can be fired in a salvo, that is definitely not something that an indigenous tribe can resist. It is ridiculous that after entering the mouth of the Elizabeth River, those natives even warned with semaphores. I didn't expect these indigenous people to understand the semaphore commonly used by the European powers. Looking at the thick smoke area in the distance, www.wuxiasput.com, Antoine is also very curious about how these thick smoke are produced. Are these indigenous people also engaged in industrial production? Could these indigenous people still carry out industrial production? Also, what is that ball floating in the air in the distance? How could that thing fly in the sky? But when Antoine was pondering the thick smoke and the ball floating in the air, a sharp and piercing scream suddenly sounded in the sky. The next moment, these screaming noises swept overhead, and then a spray of water nearly 10 meters burst out on the river not far from the fleet. With this, Antoine woke up immediately. "Damn it, it's shelling!" Immediately sound the alarm. Antoine roared immediately. As soon as Antoine's voice fell, the sharp whistling sound resounded in the sky, and there was more than one sound. The next moment, under Antoine's stunned gaze, the foredeck of the 3-tier sailing battleship Cunning that was driving in front of him suddenly burst out with a dazzling light, and a large group of huge sparks slammed from the King along with thick smoke, appeared on the front deck of the Cavalier. When the fire came up, the foredeck of the 1,480-ton King Knight had already turned into a fire. 1/3 of the front deck of the King Knight is completely gone. The front deck of this 3-tier sailing battleship seems to have been bitten off by an invisible behemoth. Chapter 598, No Need for Captives. In fact, when Henry Antoine's fleet was bombarded by Norfolk's shore defense artillery, their fleet only reached a position less than 2 kilometers from the mouth of the Elizabeth River. At the mouth of the James River behind them, 4 sailing battleships flying the Union Jack have just pursued from Jamestown. One of the 4 sailing battleships is a Tier 2 battleship, and the other 3 are Tier 3 battleships. The 4 sailing battleships arrived at the port of Jamestown from Kingston, Jamaica, in the Caribbean, 3 days ago, and are ready to leave Jamestown tomorrow to support the British Army. Since the British and the Spaniards signed the Madrid Treaty in 1670, the Spaniards ceded Jamaica, an important island in the Caribbean Sea, to the British, and it has become an important base for the British in the Caribbean Sea. It was only the Great Earthquake in 1692 that destroyed Port Royal in Jamaica, the largest port city at the time, and the British began to build Kingston City to replace Port Royal. After more than 80 years of development, Kingston City has become the largest city in Jamaica. Although it has not replaced Spain as the capital of Jamaica, this city has become the de facto largest city in Jamaica. Even the British fleet stationed in the Caribbean Sea is anchored in this port. So when Henry Antoine's fleet bombarded Jamestown to no avail, the 4 sailing battleships chased them out. Now the British are not the kind of people who have been beaten to silence. The important port of Jamestown has been shelled, and they must retaliate. It was only when the British warship came out, Henry Antoine did not find that the British were chasing after them. After they turned into the Elizabeth River, the British chased them to the mouth of the Elizabeth River. While the British were pursuing Henry Antoine's fleet, on the north bank of the mouth of the James River, near the later Hampton Harbor, a Continental Army guerrilla of about 300 people also gathered there. The Continental Army guerrilla team originally wanted to cooperate with the French bombardment of Jamestown. However, the French bombardment had no effect, so the guerrilla team returned to their base in this wilderness. Yes, at this time, there is still a wilderness near Hampton Harbor. There is no big port city in later generations, and some are just wilderness everywhere. The Continental Army guerrillas naturally discovered the British warship they were pursuing. They wanted to use the fireworks to notify the French warships and let them escape quickly, but they did not expect the French warships to get into the Elizabeth River. So, when the shore defense artillery deployed on both sides of the Elizabeth River began to fire, although they were far away, both the British and the Continental Army guerrillas saw this terrifying large-scale fireworks show. When the first test shot used to correct the bombardment coordinates exploded in a river not far from Henry Antoine's fleet, all the French panicked. Even though they don't understand why the enemy's artillery can hit so far and have such a terrifying power, they all know that their fleet is being bombarded at this time. But these French sailors are well-trained fighters. They adjusted their mentality in a short period of time, ready to turn the boat to leave this narrow river. Compared with the huge body of the sail battleship, this kind of river with a width of only 3 or 4 kilometers is really too narrow. The battlefield where the sailing battleship gallops is on the endless ocean. In this narrow river, the sailing battleship is not very useful. But when the French sailors desperately adjusted their sails and turned the bow, 12 105 mm shore defense guns from the east bank of the Elizabeth River fired the first round of salvos at the same time. Because the first test shot has successfully achieved straddle fire, the first round of the salvo was extremely accurate. One of the shells accurately hit the front 3-tier sailing battleship. The powerful 105 mm high-explosive grenade directly bited the ship's foredeck for a full 1/3, and by the way all the French sailors standing on the deck were swept away. The 76 mm artillery and 105 mm artillery used by the Yan Huang tribe are both subloaded ammunition. With the current technical strength of the Yan Huang tribe, although fixed-loaded cannonballs can be made, it is too troublesome to manufacture. Mounted artillery shells are now only equipped with a small batch of guns that are dedicated to firing fixed ammunition, such as the 105 main gun on the Carlos. Defensive artillery, such as shore defense artillery and fortress artillery, that do not require a fast rate of fire, mostly use subloaded ammunition. However, even if it is divided into shells, Shi Xiong has also developed armor-piercing warheads and high-explosive warheads based on the memory of previous lives. Armor-piercing warheads are specially designed to deal with fortifications of fortress guns, while high-explosive warheads are specially designed to deal with the sailing battleships of European powers and the large number of enemies in the Marine Squadron. The French battleship broke into the forbidden area so desperately, it would naturally use high-explosive warheads to deal with these 3 sailing battleships. This kind of high-explosive warhead filled with close to 3 kilograms of high-explosive explosives can not only produce huge destructive power on the target, but the specially cast warheads will produce hundreds of fragments after the high-explosive explosives explode. When the warhead explodes, these fragments will shoot out at a speed exceeding 3 times the speed of sound. Any soft targets without protection, mainly unprotected personnel, will be mercilessly killed by these fragments. This is the first time that the Yan Huang tribe has developed the 105 mm artillery in actual combat. I'm reading www.ukenshu.com, and this kind of 105 artillery, which was close to the later World War I period, did not disappoint the Stone Bear watching the battle on the hot air balloon. Although the low hit rate in the first round of the volley made Shi Xiong a bit unbearable to look directly at him, at least one shell hit the French warship, and then the Frenchman's King Knight became under the Yan Huang tribe's 105 artillery. The first unlucky ghost. This gun not only completely destroyed the front deck of the King Knight, but also sent more than 20 French sailors standing on the front deck to meet their Father Jesus, and the fire caused by the high explosive bomb was also extremely short. In a short time, several sails on the front deck of the King Knight were burned. Standing on the hot air balloon, the Stone Bear had already seen the 4 British warships chasing up, so he said to the semaphore officer beside him, "Semaphore below and tell them that we don't need to be captured. We must take these Frenchmen. The battleship sank. Well, tell them at the same time, let them increase the hit rate for me. What are you worried about? We are on the shore, and the French cannonballs can't hit us at all. Let's still fix the turrets. If we are at this distance I can't improve my hit rate." After the battle, all the artillery will run 10 laps around Norfolk. His sister: "You really don't need money for artillery shells. The hit rate for such a big target is still so low, it deserves it. Be punished." The semaphore officer in charge of playing semaphore immediately and honestly typed out his boss's words verbatim in semaphore, and the soldier who looked up at the semaphore below saw the semaphore. His face turned pale. Chapter 599, Overturned. The news of the boss's anger spread throughout the shore defense artillery positions in a very short period of time. The soldiers responsible for the 105 mm shore defense artillery positions on both sides of the Elizabeth River were selected from the divisional artillery regiments of the 4th Division of the Grim Bear Army. They first played with 76 guns. Later, after the successful development of 105 mm guns, these elite gunners were selected to be responsible for these 105 mm shore defense guns. Well, the most elite among them was naturally selected for the Carlos. Although their training usually uses training shells, the training effect is very good. This also makes these gunners a bit arrogant. As a result, I didn't expect that the first actual shooting would be like this, and the boss was always upset. The gunners immediately felt that it was very bad and very bad. These 12 105 mm shore defense guns are only part of the entire shore defense gun position. They are the shore defense guns closest to the 3 French warships. The effective range and accuracy of these coastal defense guns are very high. In addition, they are all fixed turrets. It really shouldn't have such a low hit rate when hitting such a large target of only 2 kilometers. No wonder Ishikama is angry. When the boss caught fire, these gunners naturally paid 10,000 points of attention, and then Henry Antoine's sailing battle fleet was completely unlucky. The enemies are all French, and Shi Xiong doesn't have to stay alive, and there are others to watch later, so it's good to take this opportunity to kill the monkeys. The second round of salvo came again after 20 seconds. Henry Antoine is not so lucky this time. Although the volley of this round was still 12 shore defense guns, the 12 shells actually hit 6. As the flagship of this squadron, the second-class sailing battleship Royal Dove, which was carried by Brigadier General Henry Antoine, is a new ship that has just been launched a few years ago. In order to commemorate the Royal Dove sailing battleship that made the limelight in the First Anglo-French War, this second-class sailing battleship was also named Royal Dove. It's just that the Royal Dove did not inherit the good luck of its predecessors. It has just been launched for a few years, and it has not even participated in a second-level sailing battleship that has been in a serious naval battle. In the second round of salvos was hit by a 105 mm high explosive bomb. One of the shots exploded directly in the middle of the upper deck. The scattered fragments swept over an area of more than 10 meters in an instant, tearing about 40 Frenchmen including Brigadier General Henry Antoine to pieces. The other 2 shells directly hit the side of the Royal Dove. Even if no armor-piercing shells were used, the hull built with 600 mm thick wooden planks could not withstand the bombing of high-explosive shells. These 2 high-explosive bombs directly tore 2 large holes with a diameter of more than 2 meters in the hull of the Royal Dove. One of the holes was located near the waterline. A large amount of river water was poured into the Royal Dove in an instant, the interior of the ship's hull. Similarly, these two big holes also destroyed part of the lower two decks of this sailing battleship with 3 decks. The most important thing is that the high explosive bombs caused a fire, and the fire ignited the propellant of the lower 2 deck guns in a very short time. So, disaster struck on the bow of this almost brand new sailing battleship in an instant. Even if the black powder used as a propellant explodes, the power cannot be resisted by a small wooden warship. Therefore, a large group of fireworks spurted out in the center of the Elizabeth River in an instant. The height of the flame was tens of meters high, and a large amount of thick smoke formed a black mushroom in the sky. The huge shock wave formed ripples on the river, and even pushed the other 2 third-class sailing battleships a distance. Then, this sailing battleship with a length of 70 meters didn't even hit a gram, so it ended its short life in the explosion of the propellant. The instant capsizing of the Royal Dauphin frightened the sailors on the other 2 French battleships. But it's useless for them to be scared, because they can't take care of themselves now. The Royal Knight, who had just received a shell in the first round of the salvo, was lucky to only hit 1 shell. This shell hit the middle of its upper deck. The thick mainmast was like a chopstick, being thrown directly into the river by the huge shock wave. More than 20 French sailors once again became wandering souls on the Elizabeth River. As for the other 3-tier sailing battleship Versailles Glory, it was hit by 2 high-explosive shells in this round of salvo. Both high-explosive shells hit the side of the Versailles Glory, tearing 2 huge holes in the hull of this 3-tier sailing battleship. However, the Versailles Glory was lucky, because the area hit by the 2 shells was between the upper deck and the second deck, and there happened to be no barrels for propellant in these 2 places. So even if the 2 shells caused a fire, they did not cause the propellant to explode. In contrast, the Royal Knight is in the best condition, but it is not much better. The flagship was instantly capsized because of the explosion, and the fleet lost its commander. Even if the captain of the Royal Knight took over the command of this squadron at the first time, and ordered the white flag to be raised at the first time, the shore defense gunners who had already been red-eyed and received the not captured order still continue the 3 steps of charging, aiming, and launching. When the third round of salvos came 20 seconds later, the 2 Tier 3 sailing battleships floating on the river immediately fell into bad luck. In this round of salvo, 8 high-explosive shells hit the target. The Royal Cavaliers and Versailles Glory were hit by 4 high-explosive shells respectively. www.wuxiasp.com. These 2 ships only have 2 decks and 3 level sails. Battleships are naturally not as resistant to beatings as their flagships. If it weren't for the fire caused by high-explosive bombs to ignite the Royal Dove's propellant, in terms of the size of the Royal Dove, the ship could still take more than a dozen rounds. Cannonball. But as younger brothers, the Versailles Glory and the Royal Knight are not good. These 2 ships can't be compared with the Royal Dauphin in terms of hull thickness or size, so when each of them was hit with 4 high-explosive bombs later, the lives of these 2 ships also came to an end. The stern of the Versailles Glory was hit by a high-explosive bomb. This high-explosive bomb tore a large hole near the waterline on the side of the hull. A large amount of river water instantly poured into the stern of the Versailles Glory. Then the bow of the ship lifted up at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the ship's bow was getting greater and greater from the surface of the water, the keel finally couldn't bear the weight of the front part of the ship, and it broke apart in a sour sound. In the end, the ship was within a few minutes. It sank to the bottom of the Elizabeth River, leaving only the tops of the 2 bymasts and countless pieces of wood from the Royal Dauphin. As for the Royal Knights, it was even more miserable. All the 4 high-explosive bombs hit its side. The 4 powerful high-explosive bombs directly tore the hull of this side of the ship to pieces, and a large amount of river water surged in an instant. Entering the hull of the ship quickly began to tilt, and finally stood up slowly, and then buckled back on the river. Hundreds of French sailors were detained just below the water. Chapter 600. Terrified, this battle was fought. It was a joyous one. Standing on a hot air balloon floating high in the air, Shi Xiong looked satisfied. The 12 105 guns only fired 3 rounds in a row, and they sank 3 majestic sailing battleships. Even Shi Xiong, there is no way to demand much of their own gunners. It's just that the gunners are still a little bit more interested. After all, it was the first actual combat. I originally wanted to make a good deal of it, but I didn't expect the French warships to be so short-sighted that they would kill them in a trivial volley of 3 rounds. You should know that in training, you usually play more than 10 rounds. There are more coastal defense artillery gunners shouting too boring. These coastal defense guns were closer to Norfolk and the shipyard. In this defensive counterattack, they did not participate in the defense because of the distance. Originally, they still wanted to wait for the 3 French warships to get closer and then they could fire a few shots and enjoy it. As a result, as for the 4 British sailing battleships far behind and the continental American soldiers farther away, they all looked stunned. Although they are far away from the battlefield, the 3 French sailing battleships are not small guys. The largest one is the Royal Dauphin II sailing battleship, which is more than 70 meters in length. If it is erected, it will be almost the same, the height of 18 stories. So even if these 3 ships are floating on the water, whether they are the British or the Continental Army, they can clearly see the battle 2 or 3 kilometers away on the river without any barriers. No matter whether the 105 artillery fired or exploded, the loud noise produced seemed to be thunder god. Especially after I was far away, the dull explosion sound became one piece, really no different from thunder. The sound is second. The most important thing is that they are the 3 sailing battleships, the most powerful weapon in the world today, and no weapon can be as powerful as this sailing battleship. Moreover, this thing is recognized as a special anti-beaten by various countries. From a distance, the Dutch challenged the Spanish Invincible Fleet, the First Anglo-French War, and from a closer distance, these sailing battleships had just ended the 7 Years' War, which was just over a decade ago. Both played a decisive role in the naval battle. This powerful warship is not only strong in firepower, but also particularly resistant to beatings. Whenever the 2 sailing battleships get close and shoot at each other at close range, the scene is only a thrilling one. Dozens of artillery fired at the same time, often able to fly the sawdust from the opposite hull, everywhere. But even so, it would be impossible to sink a sailing battleship without a volley of 10 and 20 rounds. Some sailing battleships have suffered dozens of shots in a battle, and they are still able to persist on floating above the water, which is enough to prove the sturdiness of this sailing battleship. What's the situation in front of me? 3 sturdy sailing battleships were sunk without resisting the 3-wheeled artillery salvos of the native Indians? That Christ, this is not God's joking. Those who are farther away from the Continental American Army have a good point. After all, they still have very little contact with this advanced warship. But the sailors and officers on the 4 British battleships were really dumbfounded. They have been floating at sea for half their lives, and they are most familiar with sailing battleships. But they never thought that sailing battleships would be so fragile. Especially the ammunition of the Royal Dove exploded, which simply subverted their cognition. Of course they don't know now, including before, the artillery on all sailing battleships are artillery that fires solid rounds. Although solid rounds are not weak at close range, they can hardly cause fires on enemy ships. Therefore, they are like ammunition. It's hard to see things like sabotage. But just now, those native Indian artillery told them with facts how terrifying the large fireworks caused by the explosion of ammunition. This time, both the British and Americans were completely frightened. Especially the British. They asked themselves that although they now have 4 sailing battleships, they are still in vain in front of that powerful artillery. Even if they were to be pulled up to join forces with the French to deal with the indigenous Indian tribe, it is estimated that they would not be enough for 5 rounds of volleys. Especially the commander of the British fleet, after witnessing this brief but fierce exchange of fire with his own eyes, he immediately realized a lot of things. The artillery of other people is not only powerful, but it also fires inflorescence bullets, but also has a long range and extremely high accuracy. At a distance of nearly 2 kilometers apart, people sank 3 sailing battleships in 3 volleys. This kind of artillery is really terrifying. The commander of the British fleet never imagined that an aboriginal tribe would have such a powerful weapon. This is simply a subversion of cognition. Therefore, the British fleet decisively turned around and returned to Hong Kong. The commander of the British fleet needs to report the incident as soon as possible. This powerful native Indian tribe can't mess with it. Who wants to provoke anyone? Anyway, Lao Tzu will never let his brothers face such a group of terrifying guys. As for the soldiers of the Continental American Army, they all ran away dingy. Those powerful and sturdy sailing battleships can't even carry the 3-round salvo of other artillery. www.wuxiaspot.com. The Kentucky rifle in my hand is not even a fart in front of this terrifying artillery. Stay away from these terrifying Native Americans. Seeing the British warship turn around and run away dingy, Shi Xiong knew that his strategy of killing chickens and monkeys had been achieved. Although this would also expose the existence of 105 heavy artillery, Shi Xiong doesn't care about those anymore. The current Yan Huang tribe has completely stood up, not to mention the European powers. Even if the British, French, and Spaniards join forces, the 100,000 tyrannical soldiers have absolute confidence to defeat them. Stone Bear does not believe that a group of European soldiers with flintlocks can resist the attacks of the Grim Bear soldiers with weapons that are roughly equivalent to those of the First World War. At this time, except for the tops of the 2 vice masts of the Versailles Glory, the top of the river remained above the water, and nothing else was visible. Well, there are about 200 or 300 French Navy soldiers swimming desperately on the river like ducks. These French sailors were all sailors who escaped by diving from the Versailles Glory and the Royal Knights. As for the Royal Dove, almost no sailor could escape because of the ammunition exploded. Tell the following, to pick up these French guys, and then send them all to the mine to mine for lazy, Shi Xiong faintly ordered. These sailors are all good labor. Now the mine is short of people. With these hundreds of French sailors to supplement, the mine can produce a lot of more mines. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.